Okay, so just before we start, let me know if you can hear me. Then we can get started talking about Mako and a bunch of other stuff. Okay, seems like that's working. So, yeah, let's get going. So, yeah, I have a document here. We're going to go through it. Obviously, like I've done with some of the previous recent comics, like it goes pretty in depth. I have some thoughts. We go through the character stuff. I have a few panels and stuff like that to go through. And we're going to go really in depth on this because, for the most part, this is going to wrap up the coverage on the channel for this comic. And we can talk about other stuff as well. Like, I suppose, like, we probably need to maybe open up by just talking about, like, I suppose just in general where we're at with kind of Avatar at the moment. Because if you're not paying attention, it maybe feels like we're still in the super heavy waiting period. But if you are paying attention to all of the news, stuff is beginning to build up. It's like month by month, stuff is happening. Like we had the anniversary on the last stream, and we got to talk about that. And since the last stream, of course, the Jazzwares toy line was revealed at Toy Fair. That's happening. That's coming in the next couple of months. And publishing is definitely beginning to ramp up. The amount of kind of extra, kind of random books that are being added onto the schedule for towards the end of the year, it's slowly but surely beginning to happen. And it's building up to, they're going to have to say something about the movie sooner rather than later. But, it's certainly happening. Obviously, Tuesday, the 18th, is also the release date for Realms Collide, finally being basically globally released. So, stuff's happening. We're going to have a lot of stuff that we didn't have like last year. That's the big deal there. So, I guess with some of that stuff out of the way, we will talk about sort of what we're expecting from like CinemaCon after we get through the Mako comic discussion. Obviously, if you do have your copy, definitely grab it and kind of join along with me. Definitely helps to have the material with you when you do these discussions. I've done quite a lot of content already, non-spoiler review, spoiler review. Me and Greg did the podcast review. This is just a different kind of format of discussion to kind of go through everything. So, let's jump in here. So we've had the cover for a while. Notably, actually one interesting thing with this, because this is the image I've had since they announced it. The actual, print copy, it's actually The Mystery of Penquan Island, rather than they just led with Mystery of Penquan Island. I think everyone added the on, so they just changed it, but it's a fun little detail there. So, I suppose the first question for chat is just, what were your guys' general thoughts on the book? Because you know my thoughts. If you've seen any of my content for this, I quite like it. I think the general reception's been pretty good, I think roughly in line with what I've kind of my own thoughts. Ultimately, I've seen some people be a little bit more negative, and I think the worst I've seen is maybe a few people just kind of saying, it's okay. But I haven't really seen anyone super kind of hate it or anything like that. Just that real sense, I think, like we're going to talk about quite a lot. Page count is a problem for this book, as we kind of get into. My general thoughts, just to kind of sum it up here, is just that, like, I think it's a really good start to Korra one-shot comics. They have learned massive lessons from the Avatar one-shot comics, in that they've started off a lot better than Katara and the Pirate Silver. So that's a huge positive. They chose like the right character, and they chose a notable story to tell, which was really good. And I think the book is start to finish really enjoyable. Like the investigation stuff at the start, the mysteries that come into play, getting to the island, the reveals that happen at the end. It's not perfect, but it's all like entertaining kind of start to finish. Obviously, this is a big problem. The limitations of the one-shot comic format. It's probably the clearest example of it so far, because I think a lot of the other comics either are in a situation where it's a shorter story, expanded out into 72 pages. This is the first one that really just feels like the ambition of this story is way, way beyond 72 pages. Like this needed to be multiple books. It needed like 20 extra pages at least. But there's the potential, because I think that the story's good enough to turn this into like a trilogy. I think you could have done that. Obviously, you would have had to involve more characters, much more fleshing out of what's actually here. But I think they could have done it if they were still doing that format. It's, it is a little rushed at points where, I wanted a little bit more depth, or I wanted a moment to just breathe. Like, you finally revealed something. Can we actually, stay with this for a little bit? Focus on the reaction, but instead it kind of has to be onto, like, the resolution straight away. So I would have really liked some of that stuff to happen. But, and I think this is an important but with this comic, is that despite those problems, it's actually a very impressive kind of writing feat that they did execute as well as they did on the story. Because of the challenges, especially given that, like, for the creative team, both artist and writer, it was their first time doing this format. Because Kiku Hughes had only done short stories before this. Same with Alex Monick. They'd only done short stories before. So the whole process of this was, I guess, a challenge for that creative team. And it's that maybe unfortunate situation where, yes, the Korra creative teams have maybe taken a little bit longer to get into the flow than some of the Avatar teams. We'll see how this creative team does as we kind of go forward. They obviously deliver on a lot of really interesting stuff. We do actually get to see some Fire Nation in Korra's time, though it doesn't really meet the criteria that I think a lot of Korra fans have, because this is not really representative of the actual Fire Nation in this era, but it is still seeing the Fire Nation in the Korra era. And then if I was to lay another criticism at the book, it's just that I think Mako is written well in this book, but I don't think he has that much of a character arc. He's here for the story, and they do some good stuff. Like, Kiku Hughes clearly knows how to write Mako. It's just that their attempt at an arc, I don't think quite hit as much as it should have. But I do think this is where the page count issue comes into play. You can tell that if they had more time, the setup was kind of there to do something more. But that's the kind of situation there. Islands, are we oversaturated on islands? Certainly it's become, I think, a bit of an overdone plot point, that they want to have a new location you've never seen before, and so the only logical way to kind of make that happen is to kind of make it an island. Yes, it's been a bit overdone. Because, yeah, we've had in the RPG, novels, comics, quite a lot of islands. And I do understand that. This one is... I think this one works because it's like the island their mother came from, and the fact that we didn't know anything about her ahead of time. So it was like, okay. And it's not a mystery island, but it's just an island that has a bit of a cult-like aspect to it. So it goes a little bit forgotten to a certain degree. It's like Yokoya before the interesting stuff happens at the start of the kind of Kyoshi novels. It's a bit of a forgotten about island rather than a mystery island. So I think they play with that kind of nicely. It's not just no one knows about this place. It's just, oh yeah, that place exists. There's no reason to go there, which I think is quite interesting. But yeah, the score the score I submitted to Dark Horse with the early review, and I said in all my videos, was 8.5 out of 10. It's perhaps being a little bit on the generous side, given maybe some of the issues that I have with the book, but I think there's enough here to praise it, that, like, the art, I haven't talked about it yet, is fantastic. It's really, really good. And the writing is overall good as well. It just, I think, is held back from being, like, absolutely exceptional. Like, I suppose here's the question. What is everyone's favorite one-shot comic? include the Avatar ones, obviously, like, because we have to make this work. Where does this rank amongst the Avatar comics? The one shot specifically. For me, this is, it's in the ballpark up there, I think. Because obviously it's a different book in terms of, like, I'm inclined to say Azula in the Spirit Temple is the best, but also Azula in the Spirit Temple is a specific character exploration that doesn't have much progress, whereas this has progress but doesn't have that much character exploration. Suki alone is, I think, a really nice blend of having, like, backstory standing out on its own, and the present day story being nice as well. It's, like, important for Suki. So I think those three are, like, on the top on different kind of sides of things. But I would say, I know most of you probably haven't read Ashes of the Academy yet because it's not out, of course. I would say Ashes of the Academy is probably clearly my favorite one shot. I think it's probably the most effective use of the page count so far. So that's one thing. So I think this is probably there within the top three, maybe just about. But that's just a little bit of kind of a situation there. So I think it's on the better end of things, certainly. So let's jump into this. So I think the best way to do is to kind of go through characters. Now, of course, we're going to start with Mako. So we're actually going to cover quite a lot of the book, and then with the other characters, we'll fill in the little other plot points that kind of happen as we kind of go through. So overall, I think it's a massive relief for me with this book that it mostly avoids the trap of continuing to make fun of Mako for all of the early series romance stuff. Bolin jokes about it once, and I think they make that line flow in somewhat naturally to the scene that it's in, and we're not really about that anymore. Otherwise, I do think it's a very accurate presentation of the character that treats him seriously, showing his positive traits, but also touching on some issues overall. So that's kind of my general, like, overview on this, in that I think, again, Kiku Hughes knows how to write Mako well. I don't think the character arc is really here for him. I think they sort of set up some pieces, and then it kind of morphs into being more about the brothers specifically, rather than the Mako kind of personal one that they're kind of going for. We'll talk about it when we get to the big conflict scene between the brothers, but I think that's where you can see maybe some switch-ups in the writing kind of happened. So, I'll open up with this from early on in the book, because I do think the scene before the kids arrive is there for a reason beyond just, hey, here's the difference between Mako and the other police officers. I think the fact that they say, basically, he doesn't have a personality is notable, I think. And I was a bit frustrated that they didn't come back around to this. Because it's clearly meant to link in, as in his co-workers to a certain degree agree with what Bolin is going to bring up about Mako later on in the book. So it's here to kind of connect the dots a little bit, but we certainly don't address this aspect of his character, which I think is a little bit frustrating. So, we focus on his dedication to his job, a detective with diligence, of course, but there's this issue of he doesn't seem to want to really talk to his co-workers because he's over-focused on doing the job. And I do think the point of this is to present this as, like, this is actually a flaw for Mako, rather than the co-workers are incompetent. Just because I think we're past the Lu and Gon era of the Republic City police force, where they actually have, like, properly incompetent people working there. Because obviously, like, if you're going down that road, it kind of reflects quite poorly on Lin, that even after Lu and Gon, there's still bad people coming into the police force. So I do think this is a somewhat important kind of part of kind of what happens here. But of course, the kids do enter the story, and this is obviously from the preview pages and stuff like that. We now, having had the book now, know more specifically about all of the kids. The immediate connection emotionally with them, I think, is really strong. It's really good to see this more emotional side of Mako that I think sometimes he can be maybe mischaracterized as not kind of having almost any emotion or not showing it much. So I like that he immediately sees that this little family unit is quite similar to his own. And he immediately is invested in what's going on here and treating it as seriously as he can, basically. So the connection is really, really clearly made here, of course. So that's nice to get to just see, like, yes, this is what I want to see from Mako in these type of things, connecting to the case, wanting to immediately solve it straight away. And as we kind of go through the book, you'll see that he and John do form a connection. Like the book is trying to connect the dots in the same way that it will be Bolin and the other brother. It'll be Mako and John kind of have that sort of connection. John seems to look up to Mako a little bit, and they have the whole older brothers connection overall. So there's that. Then, the next kind of real step in the case, for the most part, we're going to skim past a few of these kind of scenes here, but Bolin enters the case. He gets the worry stone kind of detail into play, and this is what opens the case up. This is what brings Penquan Island into play from this antiques expert, Fire Nation importer, whatever way that's going. I think it's a pretty fun thing to do, to kind of connect the dot of, like, here is this very unique item that really only comes from the island, and here is someone who's like an expert and knows what it is, and this is how they figure out that they need to go there. And yeah, there is a lot of nice kind of Easter eggs in this scene. I think it's more on the previous page, if I remember correctly. Let me find this again. So yeah, it's a lot of the kind of stuff more on this page here. The little soldier boy thing. You've got the fire ferret kind of item there, and all the masks in the background are really, really kind of fun as well. Nice Easter egg scene, of course. There's a lot of detail kind of going on here, but this is just to get the plot moving. You can maybe make the point here where, in terms of page count, maybe you could cut a page or two from some of this stuff if you absolutely had to give to later on in the book, but I do think it flows pretty nicely, and most of the issue is just that it needs more than 72 rather than the 72 needs to be like reassigned necessarily. An interesting point, given what the arc of the book is, he does actually take time off work to work on this case, and it's outside of his jurisdiction, and it is sort of what the book is trying to say, is that, like, he's invested in the case, so he takes time off work to work on it, but, like, will he do it for other stuff? I don't think the book really has the time to focus on this in enough detail, so you're left really scrambling to find the connections that the book isn't really making them, or am I doing all the work type thing. That's a bit of a problem. They finally get to the island, of course, because again, it's mostly Bolin interacting with, like, Hisa on the boat. So when they get to the island, we get the introduction of our villain, of course, Sheriff Panzo. And straight away, you can see that this guy does not want to interact with him. He's obviously disrespectful of the Republic City police force badge, of course. And we get introduced to a lot of the details about kind of the way the island operates. Again, we'll talk about this stuff a little bit more when we get to talking about Panzo specifically and the island. But for now, it's just that Mako immediately gets bad vibes from Panzo from this scene. They immediately can see from, again, the background stuff in these scenes is fantastic, because you can see it's got the Fire Lord Taiso in the background, the portrait. It's got a Zulon, Sozin, Ozai. And he even has the Phoenix King imagery, which I think is quite fun. I think I mentioned this on the podcast. It's like, given how long Phoenix King Ozai was around, how does he have merch? how does he have Phoenix King merch given how long that whole thing lasted? That speaks to either he got it like made after the fact or he got an original somehow, which speaks to how invested in the past he is. And then the very specific choice, of course, to not have a portrait of Zuko or Azumi up on the walls is it's a really nice visual thing as you walk down the kind of corridor up to his office that, okay, that's what we're doing here. Old school Fire Nation kind of character here is kind of interesting. So there's that. Let's see, question here in chat. What do you think about Zuko's granddaughter missed opportunity to use her in comics about the Fire Nation, or maybe in the future she'll debut there? I just think in a book like this, where it's a one-shot, there is no time whatsoever to do that. Unless the book was literally going to be Mako going to the Fire Nation kind of capital, like to meet the princess, and that's what the plot is. You just don't have the time at all in a book like this to casually introduce a character we're kind of hoping gets introduced at some point. I assume they'll try to introduce her at some point, but she is in a weird kind of position where, like, she exists because the creators said she exists. Like, there's no, like, from canon content necessarily kind of mentions of her, really. So she's in a bit of a weird situation in that spot. So there's that. But yeah, there's that. Then we get to this. This to me is the kind of big scene here. The brothers, after they have the meeting with Panzo, come out, and Bolin asks Mako to drop the case. And I get what they're doing here because right now, both sides of the plot, they don't know much about what's happening with their mother, and they don't maybe know that things are as absolutely bad as they think it is on the kind of case side of things. I do find it to be a bit of a weird one from Bolin that he would suggest this overall. I get what they're trying to do here to set up the whole protector kind of plot, but it does feel like it's a weird angle in my mind to take on the Mako character development for the book, necessarily. That it changes from, in a way, like, you're overly focused on your job to very specifically, I need my brother, I don't need the protector. Even though I think for the most part, I feel like we got to this point ultimately with these two in the end. Because what happens in the book 4 finale, Bolin saves Mako from his sacrifice being an actual, like, full sacrifice. So we kind of got this to a certain degree, and given that they will end the book on this note of they will return to this and Mako will be like, I'm your brother, not a detective at this point in time, I just kind of felt nothing when that happened, because it's like, well, yeah, that doesn't really solve the core issue though, which is, okay, you say that on the island immediately after resolving the issue, but are you going to change things going forward? And I just feel like this is the core point where the argument happens. It doesn't hit the right angle of this in my mind overall. And it's because, part of it is because they don't have the time in the book to develop Bolin's side of things. Because I think what they're trying to do is to really highlight that each of the brothers is invested more heavily in one of the things they're working on. Mako's more focused on the case. Bolin is more here for the family connection. And they're kind of misaligned, basically, to a certain degree on that. But it's not that Bolin doesn't care about the case. And it's not that Mako doesn't care about his family. It's just their priorities are slightly different because they know nothing about their mother. Their mother is dead, so the best they're hoping for is to find long-lost relatives. Whereas the case is an active case that involves a missing person. That even though Bolin says in the scene here that the kids are okay, what about Haijun? He's the missing persons. They haven't addressed that. So even if you're trying to undercut how serious it is at this point in time, there's still an active case ongoing. And so I think that's why it's weird for Bolin, as a former officer, to kind of say that. Overall, I do get the point they're doing here, that, like, yes, Mako is the protector character. He's maybe overly focused on it. But I'm also just kind of like, I don't really think that's necessarily the point that we're talking about here, and this is not the correct way to approach this, ultimately, because I think the slightly better angle on this is a little bit earlier in the book. Let me find it. Yeah, it's this page here, where Bolin kind of teases him about, like, we came to check on you when you left immediately because, you know, we maybe hoped you were out with friends or on a date or something like that, that you don't spend much time with us. That's kind of more the point that they're actually making. And I think it's a little bit of a weird point for Bolin to kind of bring up the, I need my brother here, when it's like, well, they are still brothers. There's no real, like, what is the conflict? Like, why do they actually properly go separate ways in this case? I'm not really sure necessarily, because ultimately the resolution to this is very quick. Very, very quick when they get there. So it's clearly not trying to be anything more significant than many of the times the brothers have been at odds in, like, the series, and they have a quick makeup. I don't think this does anything super different in that direction. And it's also the point where you can see the page count becomes a bit of a problem, because they leave in the page following this. And how many pages is it before they meet up again? I get there's a bit of a montage in between, but I'm pretty sure it's like 2-3 pages, isn't it? So wait, here, this happens, they leave, and then we get one. And then on the second page, they're alerted, and Bolin basically appears, like, 3 pages later. He's right there. So there's no time to show Bolin's side of what he gets up to. And most of the proper investigation of the island happens in this really quick montage where we kind of highlight that it's very Bossing Say-esque. He starts asking the people what's going on, and they don't say anything. And it's weird that they don't say anything. Like, who's this person you're talking about? I don't know about that. Stop asking me questions. Please leave. Very, City of Walls and Secrets starts to happen overall here. So, that I think it's a little bit confused what they're overly trying to do here with this. It gets to a nice point in terms of what they settle on, but it's not ideal. And it's interesting because they touch on a bit of a point when, like, Bolin comes back, and that, like, he meets up with the kids, realizes something's actually wrong, and then immediately is like, well, I don't really know what I need to do, so I think we need to go back to Mako. And I probably would have just done a bit of a thing where, like, okay, Bolin, you have the moment where he realizes that he kind of knows what to do, but not fully. That this is actually an example of where I actually need Mako to kind of be on point in this situation. That we're better together than kind of separate. Just a little kind of thing like that overall. Again, and that's just something maybe you could do if you had that kind of situation, if you had just a few more pages. Because the book ultimately is, like, Mako and Bolin. And while I like Bolin's involvement in this, you can tell that they couldn't really do all that much with him like they maybe really wanted to. Obviously, the guys are erupting is what causes a lot of panic in the place, because they're so used to everything running like clockwork that the guys are erupting at the wrong time causes absolute chaos. This is where the reunion happens kind of instantaneously, quite quickly. And again, off screen, so much happens because, again, Hisa and the kids basically have a whole plot that happens off screen that we have to get caught up to. And this is where, if this was a trilogy instead of a one-shot, I think Hisa would have been probably more heavily characterized. She's already, I think, pretty well done, but some of her backstory that we'll get to talking about when we get down the character list is going to be interesting to discuss. But it leads to some pretty nice moments here, because you get some, I think, quite nice moments with Mako talking to John again. Like, this connection really, really works. John blames himself for what happened, not being able to protect everyone. But he says it's not your fault at all. You've been a very brave big brother, helping Ming Ming and Kibby stay safe. You shouldn't have to do that while you're still just a kid yourself. And that's such an incredible line, because it's like, in a way, you're asking yourself, Mako, do you realize how, like, important you saying that is? And, like, have you actually, like, factored in that like, impacts yourself as well? That you shouldn't have had to do that? That, you know, and there's a little bit of a thing where, like, I'm like, focus a bit more in on that. That actually connects to the point you're kind of trying to make there. If, like, there was a way to kind of connect that a little bit more overall. Because this is really strong, Mako kind of saying this and then the point being made. So yeah, we get the investigation kind of stuff at this point. He tells John to look after his siblings, which is nice. And then, yeah, we get the investigation stuff, figuring out that he's a firebender, what happened with the geyser, alerting them to the fact that, hey, it's probably underground. And then we get another classic brothers infiltrating a location. You know, they always pop up from those kind of earth trap doors or some sort of a trap door somewhere. So that was a really fun moment when that actually happened. And yeah, here is the resolution. Like, I like this moment here. This is nice. He can see Bolin being the big brother to Kyubi, and that there's it kind of connects the dots in Mako's head that, like, well, there's the proof. You're doing that to someone else. You don't need me to be that protective. And this is maybe where they need to present that point of, like, you know, overprotective, no. Still allowed to protect each other, absolutely. You know, that sort of idea. And again, they have the classic bro makeup that they can always have, which is just that it's two lines back and forth and they're good, which has always been the way it's been with these two. Like, Spirit of Competition, the shipping episode from book 1. This is effectively how they resolve the pretty intense relationship drama stuff at the end. It's just they're going up the kind of elevator in the pro bending arena, and they basically just have this exact same thing happen. So this is, you know, classic brothers getting over a conflict quite quickly and easily. So that's nice to see. And then we get to some of the resolution stuff overall, which... This is nice because, again, you see the emotion here. Bolin kind of tears up. Mako kind of tears up in a bit of a different way, where you don't expect to see this from him. And I think it's really, really well done. The art, fantastic here. Bolin has her smile, and Mako has Naoki's eyes. They do get to be quite impressive in the fighting. There's not a huge amount of fighting, and I suppose they don't set the rest of them up to be super amazing, but still, it's just the brothers kind of charging through a bunch of people. Hisa and Haijun are freed at this point. They get a lot of the details about Naoki at this point. We'll talk about that a lot more when we talk about how much Naoki we actually got in this book overall. But they're just happy to finally have some information, because there is earlier dialogue in the book that kind of highlights their mother just never talked about her past before coming to the city. So they're finally getting a little bit more of that. Like, just meeting someone who knew their mother is a huge thing for them. And I like that they played up that, yes, this is a hugely emotional moment for them. Which brings us to the big, shocking moment that I think we all maybe suspected they were going to go down this road and reveal who actually did it. But it still was a bit surprising the way they did it. Like, literally a speech bubble from off screen. You know, let me get the dialogue here specifically, because it's like, whoa. Are you sure that mugging was so random? From off screen. And Panzo walks in. It's a really impressive way to do this kind of reveal. Like, it was him, it was you. And again, another really strong art moment for the expressions here of, like, Mako, furious, Bolin, angry in his kind of own way. Like, this is a massive reveal. This is the person who made their lives as complicated as it was, and put them through so much of that struggle early on. That's the situation here. Panzo orchestrated Naoki's death. He hired the Agni Kai to do this because he discovered Naoki had left the island and he now knew where she was. We'll go into the details of this in a moment here, but it's strong. You can tell there's not much time in the book left. There's about 12-ish or 10, 12 pages left in the book at this point, and there is a little bit of a sense where it's like, do you have the time to do this properly? They get there, but, you know, I would have liked a little bit more. The fighting, I think, is actually pretty good, in that they highlight Mako's quite over-aggressive at the start, and I guess leaves himself open for a big counter, so he gets knocked down. I like that Bolin mostly leaves the fight to Mako, and only assists when Mako gets knocked down, just to, you know, give Mako a chance to get back up. And then he composes himself a little bit, and gets back to fighting, and ends it with the super awesome lightning generation panel. And it was the perfect way to do it because of the moment itself, but also Panzo's reaction to Mako generating lightning is perfect for what Panzo is about as a character, as the old school Fire Nation guy who's all about the purity of, you know, traditional Fire Nation values and stuff like this. And so someone from a mixed background generating lightning like this is really super strong. Super strong. So yeah, he doesn't kill Panzo. They never even have a chance to address if that even crossed Mako's mind, going as far as to kill him. So they don't even get an opportunity to attempt to make this super like Southern Raiders, where the will she, won't she is a question from pretty much the beginning of Southern Raiders. Here, because it's so sudden, the reveal to the fight, you're kind of like, how off his game is Mako going to be because of his emotions? And you see that kind of Bolin stepping in kind of recomposes him, and they don't really get a chance to maybe overly kind of focus on it. You know, again, if there was more page count, maybe you would have liked a little bit of a longer fight, but, you know, I think it's relatively solid right now. I think they present Panzo as being pretty skilled overall, but Mako ultimately gets the win here in the end. I think I would have just liked to have seen a little bit of maybe Mako's thought process here. Maybe a little bit of internal dialogue of just him thinking about what he wants to do and reflecting on the idea of, he caused everything that happened to me in the past to happen to me, so I'm angry at him. But I'm a cop now, and I probably shouldn't do this. He needs to serve justice. I need to kind of arrest him. You know, what would Bolin do? Maybe even this is an opportunity to, like, what would Korra do? I think this actually might have been a nice moment to have another maybe little bit of a Korra moment of like, yeah, what would Korra do in this situation? As like the Avatar, what would she do? I'm a Team Avatar member, so I would probably want to follow suit in the same way. Just a little bit of that thought process is, I think, kind of what I would really, really like to see kind of added in here. That would have been like a properly interesting insight into Mako as a character, because he has killed one of his villains. Like, he killed Minghua. You can make the argument that, like, she was still alive and it was Gazan who, in bringing down the cave system, actually killed her. But in essence, he killed her. So there's that whole thing there. So there's already the situation where, like, he would have been okay, I guess, with doing it. Like, just the inherent, like, I won't kill him because it's wrong to kill, wouldn't, I think, be the Mako thing necessarily. So there's that situation here. Mako's the only one with a body count. Yeah, so yeah, he killed yeah, he killed Minghua. Korra killed Unalaq. Like, there's a little bit of a debate there about, like, is there any Unalaq left by the time she defeats Unavatu? But because of the way the kind of Dark Avatar works, there has to be some of him left, but it's just, I suppose, so hidden beneath Vatu being in control that they still present it as Korra in spirit bending them, in essence, frees kind of Unalaq from the situation. Like, she kills him. Like, she, I think, comes out of that definitely realizing that that is in essence what is happening here. So there is that. So yeah, interesting stuff. I think it's mostly done, I think, pretty well. He criticizes Panzo for his pale imitation of what the Fire Nation used to be, but now he is just a relic of this past era. And yeah, he basically arrests him, and we find out from what Hisa says that he's going to hand Panzo over to basically the officials in Haribulkan, the capital of the Fire Nation. I would have liked to have seen sort of the transfer or something like that. I think we all kind of would, to see kind of what goes on here. But this does make sense that, like, I guess this island, a little bit out of the way, has gone under the radar in terms of kind of the crimes that Panzo has committed, and he needs to face justice in the Fire Nation for this. How much of the Korra era Fire Nation do we see? So yeah, we've seen Bonte Island, we see Pension Island here, but neither island is really representative of, I guess, the kind of main islands of the Fire Nation, because we still haven't seen them yet. So kind of Izumi's little moment, and I guess what Iroh and Zuko are like, are the only things that really give you a true sense into what the Fire Nation is properly like. But it's hard to judge. They very specifically do this in a way where that's not the case here. That's actually a good setup maybe for the next one. Go testify at Panzo's trial and meet the princess if she maybe makes an appearance there. It's certainly a way to get Mako to the Fire Nation, so that's an interesting one. So yeah, there's that. Haijun tells the brothers about Naoki helping, get people settled in the city. This is what drew attention to her, and in the end is what got her killed. They find out that Naoki always bragged about her sons to Haijun. She would be proud of them both. There's no family on the island for the brothers. Naoki was an only child, and her parents passed before she left. So Bolin's quest in this book ends in failure, but he did learn more about his mother, which he's happy with. And we effectively end on this note. Bolin is like, you did great as a detective. Thanks, but I'm not a detective right now. Right now, I'm just your brother. And they walk kind of arm in arm into the sunset. I think the ending is a little bit like meh. Like, it's very abrupt in the sense that, given what you were doing, I think you either needed to have a little bit afterwards in terms of just addressing what are we doing next. If you want to really focus on the brothers, overall, I think what they should have done here is Bolin say something like, hey, you probably need to get back to work. Let's head home, like, straight away, I guess. You're probably busy. Mako turns it around and is like, do you know what, actually? I've already taken the days off. Let's spend some time here. Explore the place. Find out as much as we can about our mother from, like, Haijun. Then we'll go back home and hang out with, like, Korra and Asami. That's the way to actually resolve the kind of main arc you're doing with, I think, Mako in this book, where you're kind of highlighting that he spends too much time in work and doesn't focus on that sort of thing. I think just this note, right now I'm just your brother, is just like, and? Like, this wasn't really the point. Like, he's still going to be a detective at the end of the day. So I do think the ending fell a little bit flat to me. That this doesn't fully address the kind of issue, because it's like, for all we know, they might just go straight back home and Mako goes back to normal. Has he actually learned anything over the course of this book? The book doesn't tell us if Mako really has anything overall. Like, him saying, right now I'm not a detective, is like, it's kind of suggesting something, but at the same time, he knows this island is outside of his jurisdiction, so he's technically not really an official detective here. That sort of idea. So that's why it just doesn't like work in a really like perfect way for me. I don't think it's bad. I want to be clear. I don't think it's bad. I just think it's a really average ending to the book, that they've just absolutely run out of page count. That they've got those last 2 pages to resolve everything in the book, because they had to do the exposition about Naoki, and now it's just like, well, what do we do? There's not enough time to get them back home and then do all this stuff. We need more pages for that. So they have to just be like, we'll end it here and leave a lot up in the air. I do think this is a trait of a lot of the one-shots. I think a lot of the one-shots do just end like absolutely in midair. Some of them end with a clear tease for more, like the ending of like Toph Beifong's Metal Bending Academy. It's like Toph has a lava bender student and you're just going to leave it there. Okay. But yeah. So yeah, let's move into Bolin next. So, this is what I highlighted a little bit earlier on, but yeah. He joins Mako on the investigation, just wanting to like kind of check up on Mako, and we get the idea of, he's worried about him. You've been spending all your time working, so he was hoping you were out with friends or going on a date, which is clearly what he hasn't been doing. So they're trying to have him get like work-life balance. Like that's what they're addressing, but they don't really address it. There's the implication of he'll be better going forward, but I think it needed some sort of a vague idea of what he's going to do about that. Just a little bit more overall. I like that Bolin is the one who has the connection to the Worry Stone, in that this was something Naoki gave to Bolin that Mako didn't really know about. And I suppose it speaks to sort of the dynamic of the family when they were younger, that, Mako was the protector, but, Naoki was also the protector as the mother, so the Worry Stone was given to Bolin, which is a kind of nice little dynamic. And this is what really cracks the kind of case open overall, which is cool. And this continues, of course, as we go into the other side of his story, which is that when Bolin meets Hisa and the kids, he connects with Kibi, the younger brother. Bolin's also the younger brother, but through this dynamic, he gets to be the older brother and kind of show Mako that, he doesn't need the overprotection necessarily. And I like this. It's kind of him learning from his mother as well, using the Worry Stone for what it's meant to be used for, giving it to someone who needs it. It's nice. It's a very quick section of the book. It's just this scene and one a little bit later on, but it works overall in my mind. And then also in the middle of all of this, he eases the tension between Hisa and Mako, because one of the big traits with Bolin is that he's a more sort of charismatic character. He comes across better. He's really good with people. This is why he became the Mover Star and Pro Bending Star, all of this stuff. Like, he's famous. He's randomly got himself into all of these crazy situations. Like, he's friends with, the president and stuff like that. This is one of his skills, is that he's good with people, whereas Mako isn't as much. And so, yeah, what Mako wasn't really able to do with Hisa, Bolin is. Pretty nice. Because obviously what they're kind of doing is, like, I'm guessing, like, I don't know, like, Bolin being the presidential assistant to Zhu Li, we're setting him up to go into politics, I'm assuming, going forward, because he cared when the Earth Empire was about the kind of relief work, Now he's kind of maybe helping out with that more in the actual kind of way. Clearly, he has the charisma to get people on his side. People in the future will vote for Bolin. I think that's potentially the direction we're going in, unless maybe he does go on to have some sort of a kind of care work kind of role with kids, because he's clearly good at it. But I do think they probably have to settle on like his job thing, because they had the arc of like him not knowing what direction he's going. Now it seems like he has the kind of role that he maybe wants, kind of. We'll see where that goes in the future. That was not the focus of this book, obviously. We already talked about the argument scene earlier on. Where is it? Bolin's role in this. Bit weird that you kind of had to force Bolin into this role, even though it kind of goes against, him caring for the kids to a certain degree. That like, he has this scene, and then a few hours later is going to advocate for like, yeah, drop the case. I get it. They don't know anything's inherently wrong, but that's the situation there. He does realize he needs to get Mako involved to resolve things, which is the case, because Mako's detective skills is what gets them to Hisa, of course. He has another nice moment with Kibi, of course. We have Mako praising Bolin for this, which is nice. Like I said earlier, I like that the fight is Mako versus Panzo, and Bolin doesn't get involved. Partly because the two brothers are like a match for like nearly anyone. Like, if it was 2-on-1, like, unless you are making Panzo this absolutely next level bender, it's not a fair fight. It's not a fight that has any tension to it. So I like that they kept this kind of 1-on-1 with a minor interference. I think that was the right way to do it. And yeah, by the end, he's happy to learn more about their mother, and I guess Mako, coming out of this, will spend more time with him and the others going forward. I think a nice role for Bolin. I suppose a question is probably, is Bolin, like, I suppose, open for one... I think this is an interesting question, because like, I think we're all thinking Asami's probably going to be maybe one of the obvious next picks for one-shots in this trilogy. I don't think he needs a one-shot himself, because he was relatively involved here. Like, you can come back to Bolin in the next trilogy, or the trilogy after that, but I don't think he needs to be here in this first one, like, just by default, if you're going for like the main characters except Korra or something like that. I think we've covered this overall. How does Mako have the power to arrest Panzo? It's probably a complicated one, but technically he has found out that Panzo orchestrated a killing in Republic City and has killed other people. So like, I get there's the jurisdiction thing, but like, I guess there's a way where like, okay, I've arrested him, like it was a crazy situation, I've arrested him, I will now get in touch with the correct officials, and we have that sort of situation there. I don't think you're meant to maybe overly think about it too much, just to highlight why Mako was kind of out of uniform on this case. But at the same time, it's like, the guy does admit to killing theoretically multiple people. We'll get to that. And yeah, that is a decent point as well. Yeah, like Hisa getting the crowd to kind of agree that he has done wrong is kind of part of it as well. But there's that. Now, let's actually get into Hisa. I think Hisa is a fascinating new character. let's get a look at her here, actually. I like the character design. I think she's really fun. If this was allowed to be 2 books or even 3, I think she could have been like a really massively standout character. She already is, I think, very interesting. But I think there's some backstory stuff here that you could definitely get into with her. A few things where just like a little bit more details about what's going on and stuff like that. That could have, I think, really, really kind of helped everything out. But yeah, the implied backstory is that she's one of many people to leave Penquan Island with the help of Haijun. There's obviously the idea she's a family friend of the kids, basically. So she's clearly, I guess, a close friend of the kids' parents. And to try and make the kids' parents come true, she takes over guardianship of them. She takes them to Republic City and becomes their guardian there. There's obviously a lot that's not quite there in terms of like, I can see a lot of people maybe reading through this book and not connecting the end reveal with Panzo and the kids to the start of the book where there's other reveals, but it's fascinating. And obviously it's an incredible kind of thing for her to take on that kind of out of nowhere. Like, she goes from like 0 kids to 3 on her own as well. Like, I guess Haijun, I guess, helps as well because they have a good relationship with him, but still, like, the responsibility that she took on there is kind of, impressive. And it links in with again, like the Mako thing. Mako takes on a lot of responsibility. Hisa takes on a lot of responsibility, and they kind of highlight that at the end, that enough so that she's impressive enough in all of this that she actually would make a good leader of this island, of this village. That's fascinating. And then she's also a good fighter. Like, if you look at the background of the fight, she's just in the background taking out people. Like, she's not like, oh, I can firebend and I can throw a few moves. It's like, she seems really good, enough to take out, like, the implication obviously from the book is that, like, boys who've been trained since they knew they could firebend, and here she is just like fire kicking them away and stuff like that. Bolin supports her, obviously, which is important, but like, still, there's a few panels of her, taking people out, which is kind of fun. So she's trained herself, I guess, in secret, which is cool to see. And again, so stuff like that would have been like a little bit kind of fun to kind of cover as well. How the details of that in the past and now, present day, that sort of thing. Of course, she's wary of involving cops because of the threat to Haijun. And just a sense of like, are you involved in this case for the right reasons? So she's being, protective of everything here, but ultimately sees the good in them. Obviously, Bolin helps to get her around to that same kind of point here. But I think it's kind of nice, the way this comes out, that like she kind of sets up the brothers for like, in a way that there's a dark undercurrent to the island. Are you sure you want to kind of go into it? Which I think is an interesting angle as well. Obviously there's some off-screen stuff that happens. She does like she brings the kids back to the island, and then it's like she obviously meets up with Panzo. She gets taken, so I guess she basically sacrifices herself with the potential hope that the brothers help her. Like, it's an interesting one for her because she basically tells the brothers to not get involved. So there was maybe a scenario where she didn't have anyone to really call out to help for, but she obviously read them correctly that they wouldn't take no for an answer and they would stick around, which is fun. And she cleverly heats it up to make it happen here. Can we quickly discuss the Hot Mako panel? I'm assuming that is I think I saw people reacting on Twitter to that. It's this one, isn't it? That people are... I saw a few people freaking out about this one. The actual Mako side of the fandom freaking out. I think it's this one there. But yeah, there's a lot of Mako stuff. And again, we haven't seen Mako in a comic in a long time. Hasn't been in any of the short story stuff. So him getting a whole book makes complete sense. So yeah, there's that. So there's that. And then yeah, we get to her big moment. Revealing to everyone that she openly firebends as a woman, like, on the island. And you can see everyone is shocked by this, because that would get someone, like, imprisoned, basically. That's sort of the idea. Like, you know, the quote-unquote Dai Li will take you away. But she does this openly now that Panzo's been captured, and realizes that, hey, if I didn't go against the order of the island, I'd be imprisoned. The sheriff would still be calling the shots. We have to change, like the rest of the Fire Nation has changed. He has kept you in the dark from, like, the progress of the rest of the world, saying that they're wrong, but we can't be stuck in the past. It's a really nice speech. It goes on for like a page and a half, 2 pages. Again, if it had more page count, you would have liked to have seen maybe a little bit more discussion here. If they had maybe let Panzo talk a little bit more, you can sort of see how they might have been able to do some interesting things when it comes to, them bringing up details like, one thing maybe you guys don't realize, he had these boys' mother killed. And also, he orchestrated potentially the death of his own son or daughter. And daughter or son-in-law. And bring up that sort of stuff. The kind of unspoken stuff that maybe the exact details of which do everyone on the island know about. It's interesting. They obviously highlight that it's going to take time. Not everyone fully agrees with this, but they're kind of going along with it. But Haijun, I think, makes the point that once we're not isolated anymore, we will then be... The people will see sense in a way, because they will see what they've missed out on for all of these years. And they'll realize that the change is actually good overall. Because, again, let me scroll down to the bottom here, actually. Remember, this is what the island looks like. It's very kind of rustic. It's very old school, considering what a lot of modern places look like in the Korra era. And I'm assuming that a lot of the Fire Nation mainland and stuff like that probably is a bit more advanced. This is particularly old school, because Panzo kind of is like, it's not just the wartime era of the Fire Nation. He's also thinking about warlord stuff, so going right back to like early Fire Nation history as well. So there's certainly some interesting stuff going on there. But yeah, Hisa was standout overall. I know she's going to be the leader of the island going forward, so that's kind of fun. Again, there is stuff like that I would have liked to have seen, like, in a way, covering her connection to the family in like a little bit more detail, in terms of like, was she close friends with the parents' mother, father, both, that sort of dynamic, and just a little bit more of the history overall. You could sort of tell that, yeah, if they had more time, that sort of stuff could have, I think, been fleshed out a bit more. Let's go into the kids. Starting with Ming Ming. Unfortunately, Ming Ming doesn't get to do much. She's not a focus in the book, because the boys get kind of paired up with the brothers, but she just kind of is a little bit on the sidelines. It does sort of feel like, I guess, they partly included her just to make the family dynamic different than Mako and Bolin's, that it's 3 siblings instead of 2. Because... Oh, whoops. Dropped my comic. Otherwise, I kind of was waiting for the reveal that she's also a firebender, since that's a plot point in the book, is that like the girls aren't allowed to firebend, and maybe that's part of why her parents wanted to get her off the island. Never happened, so she's just a kind of there. It's an interesting one. Where again, is there something on the cutting room floor in this comic when it comes to her? Probably. Like, I would kind of headcanon somewhat strongly that she probably is a firebender, and that's probably part of maybe why a lot of this is happening. That's the only kind of real connection I can make here, obviously. Kyuubi, obviously, they attach to Bolin in the book. The Worry Stone kind of gets brought up here. Bolin being a big brother to him. There's not really a lot there because he's kind of meant to be the sort of like, you know, the much younger character of the group. And, you know, it's a nice moment for Bolin, but, you know, Kyuubi himself maybe isn't that much of a character as such. John is a bit more of a character, obviously, because he clearly seems to admire Mako to a certain degree, look up to him. And there's a little bit of an element of, like, maybe he wants to become like Mako, which is interesting given that, like, his grandfather wants him to become like him, a sheriff. But here he actually has a, you know, big brother figure to look up to in a detective, kind of similar position, but doing things in the right way. It's an interesting one if, like, you know, going forward, if the brothers were to actually become like mentors properly to the kids, rather than just this kind of one-off thing. I'm assuming that might be part of the case, but, you know, we'll see. Mako helps to, you know, John to be strong in these kind of situations. He does kind of put him in charge of his siblings while they go down to fight, which is nice. We had the scene from before where he mentions like that you're so young, you shouldn't have this much responsibility, which is very nice from Mako. So that's all nice. But then we have to get into the big talking point about the kids, which is the big reveal that the kid's grandfather is Panzo, which is a really notable reveal that happens later on because of these lines from like the very opening scene of the book. When asked about their parents, they died back in the Fire Nation village where we're from. And then Hisa brought us to Republic City because our parents always wanted to raise us here. So, given what we know about Panzo, you connect the dots and it's like his own family wanted to get out of there to help their kids. And they died. Like, the implication is right there. Did he kill his son and daughter-in-law or daughter and son-in-law? It's right there, but like it's never properly surfaced in a way where, like, was it just like an actual accident? Was there a sickness or something like that? Because you'd think, like, from the way kind of it's talked about here, that, like, especially if the kids maybe knew that that was the case, that this would be brought up. And so I think there is kind of the implication that they maybe don't know that that's actually the case. Maybe Hisa knows that what actually happened to the parents, but the kids are just told that they, like, died in an accident or something like that. Not that their grandfather orchestrated their deaths in the same way he orchestrated Naoki's death. It's a massive, massive reveal because it turns this guy from already a really awful character, like a Yan Ra, to suddenly he's done something like even worse to even more people, and there's kind of the implication that he maybe has done this to a lot of other people as well. That's really crazy, but like the book almost, like, you can definitely go through this and not make that connection because this stuff is from like page 5, and then the reveal like about Panzo being their grandfather happens like on page like 60 or something like that. Like, there's such a gap between the two, and they never interlink them in a way because, again, they never really go into the Hisa connection to the family all that much, really. That sort of idea. So yeah, then there's Panzo wants John to, I guess, be the sheriff in the future, but he doesn't want to be. But maybe does he want to be a detective like Mako? Who knows? Character design resemblance of Panzo is Zhongzhong and Ozai. The artist put up the character designs, concepts for Panzo, and there's definitely a few that look like kind of other Fire Nation characters, because there's always going to, I think, with especially like the comics, be a sense of this character is similar to this character taken in a slightly different direction. I can see in Panzo like a little bit of a Zhang Zhang, but I definitely think they make him unique enough overall. That whole idea. Next we have Haijun. So he starts the book as our missing person, and we don't meet him until like right towards the end. So we find out that he has been the guy like orchestrating people getting off the island. He's the good guy in all of this. He's been helping people escape pension for many years. The island has long been a kind of prison of its own. The sheriff views himself as the last true fire warlord and the faithful keeper of traditional Fire Nation culture. I always hated seeing him and his men forcing our boys to fight for them and denying our girls the chance to hone their skills. Decades ago, I started smuggling people out on my fishing boat. They were kids and young people desperate for a full life, not the oppressive pageantry of this town. And he did, in fact, help Naoki off the island as well. Let's see, do you think there could be a Tenzin one-shot comic? Yep, absolutely. Definitely there could be a Tenzin one-shot. He's one of the main characters, and they seem to, I guess, with Mako as this first one, maybe going for a main character trilogy, so Tenzin is a possibility if they want to really change up the story. Like, this is Mako going to the Fire Nation. Asami might be more focused on Republic City, potentially, if she gets a book. And then, yeah, Tenzin allows us to see a different side of the city, the island, maybe out somewhere with the new Air Nation, that sort of thing. Book left us on a cliffhanger. It's not that the book left us on a cliffhanger, it's probably just more that, like, yes, the book probably could have had more of an epilogue, but it's not really a cliffhanger. It leaves certain stuff, like, open in that, like, we don't see Panzo go on trial or what exactly happens to him, but, like, you could be comfortable that, like, okay, that'll happen off screen. There's stuff like that where there's a lot of, we assume this is what happens next, but it's not a cliffhanger in the sense where, like, we have to return to this as a follow-up, like, immediately. I more view where this book ends as, like, if we ever focus on the brothers again in the future, them mentioning going to the island, going back to the island for some sort of a thing or another is absolutely a possibility, because now they have a bit of a connection to the other side of their family, even if it's just the place where their mother was from, and because they have the kind of brother type connection with the kids, Hisa and the kids, that they might want to kind of, you know, connect those characters a little bit more together. So there's that. He reveals key details about Naoki at the end of the book, which we'll get to in the Naoki section. Panzo. So let's actually talk about Panzo, because I think there's probably actually been quite a lot of talk about him. So Panzo is the sheriff of Penquan Island. He obviously, as we got, he thinks himself the last warlord. He's like the keeper of true Fire Nation culture, which is basically just kind of the culture as it was when the Fire Nation was in charge, and it lines up with his own kind of worldview, that sort of idea. He obviously seems to ignore Fire Nation progress post-war, and he focuses on the, like, 100-Year War era and before, going, like, all the way back to the kind of warlord kind of era type stuff, while seemingly adding his own restrictions that are different than some of the negative aspects of the Fire Nation during these earlier eras. Like, just directly, if you are a boy and you are a firebender, you are immediately recruited basically into the kind of the police force to become, quote unquote, his, like, sheriff kind of officer army. And then he just flat out does not allow female firebenders to develop their skills at all, and is very, very annoyed about anyone who actually does try to do that. Which, as far as we're aware, is not really a thing, broadly speaking, across the Fire Nation. You can maybe make the point that it's more noble families that have the kind of the female firebenders go into, like, officer training, and that's like the Royal Fire Academy for girls. And is it as open across the board necessarily? Not really sure about that, but like, I don't really think the point being made here is that they're trying to be like, this is the way the inherent Fire Nation used to be in the past, and it's more, this is Panzo. Panzo added this bit on, overall, because we have female firebenders in past eras, obviously. Let's see. Is there a potential Pali connection to this island? I'd be surprised if that was the case, but who knows? Who knows? Oh yeah, because there's the whole warlord thing, actually. Maybe. But I'm assuming with Zahir that the warlord might not be alive still if Zahir dealt with him. Hard to say, though. Hard to say. Different warlord. Which is why he's the last one. And so, yeah. Here he is after he revealed he orchestrated it, of course. I warned her that if she didn't stay in line, there would be consequences. Then one day, she just vanished. Years later, I heard Naoki had turned up in Republic City, so I got in touch with an old friend who joined up with the Agni Kai Triad. Told him there was a big reward for whoever took care of her. So that's how it happened. Well, does Panzo call himself the last warlord? It's more like Hai Jun, his interpretation of Panzo is that he considers himself that way. The sheriff views himself as the last true fire warlord. So I don't know like what distinction we're necessarily trying to make here. Clearly, I think to people who visit the island, he mostly goes by, I'm the sheriff. Because he can't publicly just say, I'm a warlord, because that would eventually get off island, and I guess it would bring the Fire Nation down on them. There's definitely an element of, there's a cover story over the top of what he's actually deep down doing. It's a sheriff kind of police force, but in essence, it's a mini army that he has. You know, he's the sheriff, but he's really a warlord, that sort of thing. Combustion menders are made on pension. Don't know about that, but maybe. And yeah, he's all about control. Like, just the fact, the way he talks about anyone who leaves the island. He's obsessed with that. Like, he can't understand why people would want to leave, and he can't just accept that they've got through his grasp. He has to still deal with them, even though they've left already. That's like to an insane degree of like control that he wants. And obviously it's trying to keep up the act, because if too many people get off the island, inevitably, I guess, someone would probably maybe go super public with it and ruin everything he has going on. And it ultimately happens because of something he probably couldn't have ever predicted, which is, you know, the sons of one person he had killed making their way back to the island and figuring some stuff out, which is kind of an interesting plot point just when you think about it that way, that's how he gets taken down. So yeah, and then yeah, the idea that he has killed Naoki and potentially members of his own family. That's kind of crazy. He doesn't like that she was a firebender. You know, he hired the Agni Kai Triad to kill her, which speaks to the idea that, like, he has contacts off island. And then this is where we get into, if the book had more storyline, it's, who is he? Like, what's his backstory? Why is he the leader of this place? Why is he the sheriff of this place? Did he used to be in the Fire Nation military? Because, like, what age is he? He's like 50s? Maybe? So he doesn't go all the way back where like he's old enough to be part of the military, like under like an Ozai or something like that. That's not the case. So he's reflecting on the past that he was never really part of. That whatever way you place his age, he's born post-war. Like that idea. So it's it's interesting, like the way that all works, and that like obviously it's an out of the way island that doesn't have that much going on. So I'm guessing he probably was just part of whatever the actual police force was there and just took over and made himself important enough in that position that he gained control and effectively became the leader of this place. That's the only thing I can really think of with him is just that he probably is either a Fire Nation soldier who like left their army, went to this island, didn't like the way things were or where things were going, maybe under Fire Lord Zuko earlier on in his life and then Izumi, and wanted his own stuff. He probably got beat up by a girl. Actually, that's probably part of it. Ultimately. And yeah, this is huge. Like this is like the big thing of like, I get it's a cool connection when you make it that like there's this actual crazy thing that he did, but like I think the book almost works a bit better if you make that really public. Like imagine the moment like that gets revealed and maybe the kids hear about that and they get the truth about what happened to their parents. Like that's a huge moment if they went for something like that. Is that maybe too dark almost? And that's why it's left for you to kind of connect the dots yourself. That like it's one thing to confirm what happened to Naoki without showing it. It's another one that like he killed his own family for the same thing. Maybe it's a little bit dark. I don't know. And then yeah, he's bested by someone from a earth and fire mixed background, which is soul crushing for him, obviously. So that's the perfect defeat ultimately for him. Again, you would have liked a little bit more reflection, space to breathe. Not really sure. Too dark in the Korra era. It's an interesting one. Like the comics as well, I think maybe the quote unquote age rating maybe is a little bit different than some of the stuff they were doing in the show. But still, because you kind of have to ask the question, like, why isn't that like said more directly by anyone? Why doesn't Hisa at any point say, you had your daughter killed? Because that's the clear implication, is that if anyone knows the truth of what happened, it's Hisa, which is why she knew to grab the kids and leave. And that's where, like, if you were to have a lot more backstory in this book, that's one of those ones that's huge. Like, you show the moment where that happens, where Hisa, catches on late to the fact that they're about to be taken out, grabs the kids, and just barely gets off the island. That's interesting. Then we go into Naoki. So obviously we learn Panzo was the one who had her killed. So they commit to, yes, Naoki and San were both killed in the way that was demonstrated before. But it wasn't just a kind of random mugging. It was the Agni Kai triad, which, if I remember correctly, like that the Agni Kai triad from Mako's family is new. We always knew that it was the Agni Kai triad for Asami's mother, who killed Asami's mother, but it was always just a mugging for the brothers. So they've actually now connected the dots a bit here of like, it was the Agni Kai triad for both. I think that's the case, isn't it? Or am I getting that mixed up? I have to check that in a second. Yep, Yasuko killed by a member of the Agni Kai triad. Yeah. So yeah, the reveal of the Agni Kai triad for this family as well is interesting. Obviously, I don't. Is there any way to connect the dots there? Like, that's an interesting one that they've actually now made the same triad be behind both deaths. I'm not sure if there's really any way to, like, unless, like, surely there's no way Yasuko is from this island as well. Because she is the Fire Nation member of their family. So, I don't know. That'd be a really interesting one. If they did that. Like, somehow Yasuko and Naoki, like, knew each other, knew of each other. And it's just this weird kind of destiny thing that, like, one day their children would be Team Avatar members. It's just interesting to think about now that, like, the Agni Kai detail has actually, like, linked everything together. But it also speaks to, I suppose, a little bit of Panzo's hypocrisy that, like, he's all about true Fire Nation stuff, but, like, he hires, like, a Fire Nation gang in Republic City to kill them. So you can tell where his focus is. The control matters more than being, like, fully about all firebenders should be this way. He has no problem hiring them for something like this. So there's that. Yeah. After Naoki got settled, she was eager to help others from pension, so whenever I brought someone new to the city, she would help them find a place to live and a job. That must be how the sheriff found out she was here. In the end, she paid a terrible price for her kindness, with the idea being that if she had just settled down in the city, got a better business, and not assisted Haijun, she might never have been found by Panzo, and they might not have died. And that is an interesting kind of tragic angle to it as well. Her wanting to help other people get the same second chance she got led to it kind of happening in a way. It's very, very tragic in that way. We do get a description of Naoki. Haijun describes her as being like a smart, fierce, brave. I suppose from some of the stuff Panzo says about her, a little bit rebellious as well, because she seemed to openly train her own firebending, which is interesting. She left the island after the death of her parents, because there was nothing left for her. Haijun was the one to help her leave, of course. She then met San, started the family, the kind of part of the story that we actually know. We find out that she always wanted a family, especially after her parents kind of passed on. This became a huge focus for her. And yeah, she then helped Haijun relocate people to the city, that sort of idea. And then finally, we have to wait like the whole book for it, but finally a new piece of Naoki art. As in, like, I think the reason the family portrait is on the cover, because we all speculated that, oh, is that photo going to be important to the book, specifically that photo? But the reality, I think the takeaway is just that this is the only official art of Naoki, and it's the only way you would actually recognize it is Naoki. So that's why the photo's on the cover. It's really, really nice. And this line of dialogue is just huge gut punch, like hugely emotional piece of dialogue here overall. There's so much, what if to this, and it's so nice to see, because like what ages do we think they are here? Because I don't know, is this Bolin at 3, Mako at 5, something like that? It's really nice. 6 and 4, yeah, something like that. She wanted you two to have a better childhood than the one she had on pension. I know things didn't work out like she'd hoped, but seeing the men you've become, she'd be so proud. That's really strong. And again, it's from a character we barely know. Haijun is the one kind of telling us about this. Yes, it definitely makes you wish there were maybe Naoki flashbacks, covering what she was like when she was younger, some of that stuff. I would say it's still open enough to where if they ever do another like short story collection style thing, you could do a Naoki flashback thing. You know, the some of that flashback stuff, the story of how she and San specifically met, I think would be kind of nice. A lot of that stuff I think works pretty nicely overall. And yeah, like this really speaks, this line that's said here really speaks to the idea of how controlled things were on the island, how no one really had freedom, especially Naoki as a female firebender on the island. And she wanted them to be free to do what they wanted, because that's the other thing, is that like if she always wanted a family, but she would know the whole time if she ever started the family on the island, if she had firebender children, which she was probably likely to as a firebender herself, they'd be taken by Panzo and put straight into like the army basically the second they were discovered to be firebenders. So there's all this sort of details here about like this is why she made the choices that she made. So it's really nice. I do wish we had more than one image of Naoki. I think especially because the picture is on the cover. I think that's one of those ones where like you ask anyone to speculate about the Naoki stuff in the book, I think everyone would have predicted more than one image of her. But it's really nice. It is really, really nice. So there's that. And then just the island, I suppose. We obviously find out that it's purposefully kept in the past. It's old school. And I think it's old school going way back before like the Sozin Taiso era, where this is trying to keep things back in the old days, like early Fire Nation history, warlord stuff, not move it on at all, which I think is super interesting. It links into like what Panzo kind of like says about kind of the island. Here we honor tradition and protect our own. We take pride in delivering justice. And as soon as a boy starts firebending, we train him up. And when he's old enough, we deputize him. Our firebenders are the law, and that's why we close more cases than any other force in the nation. Probably more than you Republic City jokers too. I take my job very seriously, and if one of my citizens has a problem, I'll deal with it. This is a nice, peaceful, real Fire Nation community, and we intend to keep it that way. I think the use of the word real there is massively telling with Panzo as a character. And I think the way, you know, it gets talked about later on by other characters is very telling. You know, he's the true faithful keeper of traditional Fire Nation culture, even though he's morphed it to his kind of own way of doing things. He calls what happens on the island oppressive pageantry, as in they're putting up a front, showing themselves to be this old school kind of town. And that's the way most people view it. It doesn't have much going on except for a few specific kind of exports. But actually, it's very controlled to be like that. All the people are effectively oppressed and kept from doing anything to keep it that way. That's very, very telling. I really like the term that Hisa uses in her speech. She says, we've sacrificed our children's futures to his deranged nostalgia, which is the perfect description for what this place actually is. That I think like Mako says to him as well when he's on the ground. This is just a pale imitation of what the Fire Nation used to be. And now you are just a pathetic relic of a bygone era. And that time is now over. That it is just this construct. It's forced to stay like this instead of moving on with the times. It'll be interesting to see how it evolves if we ever do get to see it again. Like that probably is the big thing, and it's the typical one-shot problem and dynamic. Are we ever going to see this place again? Are these characters, Hisa, the kids, Haijun, are they ever going to be referenced ever again? Because certainly the next two one-shots are not going to do it. The Avatar one-shots are 6 in at this point, and effectively none of them have really referenced each other overall. It's interesting. I think you've given the brothers something else to do that's like theirs, their family, Fire Nation kind of aspect, that they have a connection to this island. The kids are in play, like John and Kibi. That's, I think, a nice thing. Hisa is someone that the brothers are now connected to. That's all, I think, very, very interesting. I guess Haijun, maybe Mako and the police force can more heavily assist him with doing things a little bit more officially. If anyone wants to go to the city, however that works, we have to wait and see. But yeah, it's an interesting one, definitely. But yeah, I maintain it's a very good book. It's just that this format, one comic, and it's just one off on its own. As the only comics we get for Avatar and Korra at the moment, it's too limiting of a format in the way it is right now. I've always said about the one-shot comics that these are fine as extra comics if we also have mainline comics. If we have a trilogy and then, hey, here's extra stuff, it's a Mako focus book. Here's extra stuff, it's this character doing a thing. But instead they have to be this weird middle ground of, I think the first probably 2 ATLA one-shot comics really highlighted that it's not good enough to just have a random story happen to a character. It has to be a somewhat notable story, and if it's not notable enough, like maybe Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer, it doesn't really capture people's attention. If it doesn't progress things enough, does it capture people's attention? And at that point, it's kind of like, what exactly are we doing here? This is why it is exciting that it seems like we're going to get advancement somewhere, maybe. Like, we're doing different formats. The Dark Horse apparently have a comic miniseries to announce. We'll see what that is whenever it gets announced. But at least it looks like they're doing something different overall. I like these books, but these should not be the mainline Avatar comics. Like, in that sense, the switch has been a little bit of a failure. Like, it's prevented maybe big stuff from happening that Avatar Studios have to deal with, but given that Avatar Studios still hasn't launched anything yet, the decision to stop trilogies like years ago is crazy in my mind. Really, really crazy in my mind why they made that decision so long ago, when it's now clear that, like, what were the Avatar comics going to do that would get in the way of what this movie set like 8 years in the future is going to be doing? That's the whole point of Avatar Studios, is to deal with kind of continuity like that you can have writing happen on the big stuff while also putting out comics. I don't know. It's certainly interesting. This is obviously going to do well because it's the first Korra comic in years. They started well. I think if they do like a Sami next, that will sell well. There's a few other characters that I think will do well. The problem is, I think, like, we're maybe beginning to encounter, we'll probably encounter it sooner with Korra than Avatar, is after about the first 6 or 7 of these, what do you do? After Avatar's done maybe 9, 10, what do you do then? Because there's clearly a level of character that they maybe can't really necessarily do just on their own, or don't want to do on their own in the comics. They have to switch it back at some point. Like, so I don't know. Our comic trilogy is going to come back eventually. I hope so. Because I am a little bit kind of confused about the situation that we're in. But yeah, this is the first of a trilogy, so it'll be Mako and then 2 others. So let's actually cover that here. So, the big question, obviously, who do we think? I think Asami probably has to be locked in for one of them, because I think she fits the bill as basically being in the same situation as Mako, as one of the main characters who really needed a solo adventure to just have that character be on page for most of the time. Asami, I think, needs the same treatment. Absolutely. And then, who next? Like Bolin, Tenzin, Jinora, Varric, you know, it has to be that level of character who can kind of like hold a book on their own. Everyone says Red Lotus, but I'm like, how do you do that? Like, what is the connection between, like, say, Mako, Asami, Red Lotus? Like, it's a bit odd. If they start a trilogy and it's just like, hey, the trilogy is going to be the Red Lotus trilogy, great. But I don't think they're randomly just going to throw in Red Lotus stuff right now. And that's the thing, like there's a lot of story ideas in general that we want, but you have to factor in what the one-shots are and what they aren't. The one-shots are not really allowed to advance the story too much. They're allowed to do backstory, but typically I don't think they're going to do big, giant backstory like that, where it's like really essential, like this defines the characters. They haven't necessarily, I think, done that like yet with the comics. Whereas I think the Red Lotus stuff, to me, reads like something like maybe a novel might get to first before the comics. But I don't know. Maybe when Avatar Studios starts, the comics will be open a little bit more. Maybe the comic miniseries that's going to get announced for Dark Horse is something like this. Because I'd really like to read that in like a multiple issue type format. That's the situation. Will we ever get a new Korra trilogy? So the 3-part comics, a lot depends on what changes when Avatar Studios starts. That, are they going to keep the switch to one-shots that rule over the top of the comics in place once we get started? Or does that drop because we've started? I think I can see the format opening up because they are already doing more. Just to highlight this again for people who maybe missed it. Anniversary announcement. Towards the bottom of this, we've got publishing. Comic mini-series Dark Horse. This has not been announced yet, but it is clearly a new format of comic we've never had before. We've never had something called a mini-series for Avatar or Korra comics. So I think most of us think this has to be single issues for the first time. And that's a key thing. The other point is that, yes, on the other side of things, Ashes of the Academy is the next Avatar comic out. And this is one shot number 6. So end of one shot trilogy 2. So one... This is the question. Is we're actually at a break point in Avatar comics. Where did they just go and do one shot 7? Or because the next comic, because it's likely to launch probably in or around like probably January next year, I'd guess, it's going to be launching in or around the Avatar Studios stuff. Is this going to be the first like comic under Avatar Studios proper, or are we just doing the same thing? We basically know Faith Aaron Hicks and Peter Wortman, I think, are still on board as a creative team here. and they did Imbalance, so they've done a proper trilogy before, then they switched to the one shot. So what are we doing? This is a key point as well when it comes to this, and because we're caught up as of like less than 2 weeks from now, we are going to be fully caught up with all of the announced like story content outside of the Free Comic Book Day book. We are waiting for the next Korra one shot to be announced. We're waiting for the next Avatar comic to be announced, and anything else that's happening. This is where we don't know where we're going, because clearly publishing is changing, publishing is evolving as we go forward. We've seen that over the last bunch of weeks and months. Look at all the random different types of books that are getting announced. We're getting 3 novels this year, and we're probably going to be getting 3 novels next year as well. That's huge. All the other publishers are going to continue to put out stuff like, I Am Toph, put out those Relics of the Four Nations books, the water painting book thing, all that sort of stuff. And there's going to be a ton more of that when they finally reveal a lot of the tie-in stuff for the movie. That's obviously been kept under wraps for now. But like when they start to announce books for like January, February, there's going to be a ton of that stuff. And it feels like the proper publishing, the comics, novels and stuff like that has to evolve. We haven't seen what the plan is for the comics yet. We have for the novels that they're continuing the main series, but they're doing the Avatar Legends series with the Jin novel. We're getting kids novels, but the comics need to change as well. And this is where like there is room for a lot of other stuff. Like, is Webtoons getting original content? Is this related to the kind of Webtoon stuff and them getting original content, or separate to that? Is the Webtoon thing actually going to happen? I don't know. There's all of this stuff that has the potential to happen. And then again, we're still waiting for Beasts of the Four Nations to be announced as well. So there's a lot of stuff here. And we don't know really what the situation is with like Dark Horse. Let me just show you the list we have here, just to highlight like that we have books going back a really long time. Like, look, book for December, Avatar sticker book for December, few weeks before the movie hits. This is a Blue People Avatar book. Avatar Paint with Water, the Thunder Bay press book. You can see here, this book. The Paint with Water book is coming out in December as well. Relics of the Four Nations just got announced earlier this week, coming out in October. Awakening of Roku, the second Avatar cookbook in September. The Lighted Up Bending Academy book in September. The Netflix calendar in August. July for City of Echoes, of course. How to Draw seems to be the book that's going to kind of start it all off. Start off this kind of new trend of publishing, because you can see like there's some reprint stuff with the novels, the omnibus short story collection, because there's a big gap after this. Once Ashes of the Academy comes out, you'll note the gap between content is quite large. Yes, there's the Free Comic Book Day book in May, but that looks like a very small, minor story. Comic-Con is going to have to be big on the publishing side of things, even though we're also expecting other stuff as well. But you can see what's happened here. Like that, usually we'd be looking for like end of year books as like, oh, will one of the other comics sneak in before the end of the year? But now it's like, we've got tons of stuff coming out. Look at all this extra books. And then you have to assume movie stuff is going to start to hit as well. Because I think one of the underlooked pieces of news when it comes to the toy line was that little interview segment that I covered when I was covering the Toy Fair stuff about the Jazzwares toy line, where they said the toy line will expand in the future to include the movie. That's massive, because it's full confirmation that the movie is going to be like interlinked with all of this stuff. That even all this stuff right now, this is basically just hype for the 20th anniversary of Avatar. This isn't even the stuff about the movie. It's just, this is the build up to the big stuff. So I can only imagine how many books are probably going to be out in January and February is probably the idea. And then, yeah, right now, the only missing stuff is basically what's next for Dark Horse. Sure, technically, what was it? It was the... Yeah. This. Technically, this was recently announced, but it's a reprint. You know, it's the omnibus of the first one-shot thing. You know, sure. Final, you know, format for that. Obviously, the next three, so Azula and the Spirit Temple, Bounty Hunter the Tea-Brewer, and Ashes of the Academy, will be collected into a named hardcover and omnibus at some point. But that won't be for another couple months. So yeah, stuff is happening. We're getting there. And that's the exciting thing, is that the more time goes on, we're going to get reveals about all these other books. But we're also getting close to January books being solicited. So potentially in the next month or two, we're maybe going to start to see early signs of what books are releasing with, like, directly before the movie and like during the movie, that sort of thing. That's going to be quite exciting to look at. But that brings us to, I suppose, this point. The next big thing we're looking for is CinemaCon. CinemaCon is the week after Ashes of the Academy comes out. Paramount has their big panel April 3rd. This is going to be the day when, high likelihood, we at least hear something extra about the movie. This, of course, is a movie event. We will not hear anything about Seven Havens, probably, because it's completely movie focus. I also would say, keep your expectations low still, because this event is very important. It's a behind closed door event. What is shown will not be seen publicly, unless they just time it in such a way where, like, they show something to the press and they show something to us also. I do think there's going to be more than just like a description of like a scene. The reason for that is just that this movie still has so many things that are not like confirmed, that the movie still basically hasn't been announced yet. And we're absolutely getting into the range where, like, we're like 9 months to go. There's just some stuff you have to confirm at some point. Like, the reason we absolutely expect it to show up is that there was news about the movie at this event the last 2 years. This is where the leaked image, this one, came from 2 years ago. We weren't meant to see it, but it leaked accidentally. Casting info is what came out last year. And now we're in the months building up to things. There's some stuff they have to confirm. So my guess is that I think they probably will use this as an opportunity to say something publicly. So I think stuff like, 1, finalize the title. No more working title. It's maybe called this, it's maybe called that. You have to lock down what the movie is called with 9 months to go. I think it's just crazy if we still come out of this event not knowing what the full name of the movie is pretty dumb in my mind. A clear commitment to the January date, or reveal of a new date if there is any sort of changing around that they want to do. Interestingly, again, as part of the press release, the movie was reiterated as having the January date. So that's a positive. They might slightly adjust it. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I think we're past the time of any sort of big delay. And again, the reason I think you can say that with confidence is because if there's too big of a gap between the toy line launching and I think like movie stuff coming into the toy line, they've mistimed it. A lot of the publishing stuff as well is going to have to be timed properly as well. They have to have the sort of 20th anniversary Avatar stuff transition directly into Avatar Studios stuff. And that means they have to hit early 2026. Maybe it's not exactly January 30th, but you've got to be in those first couple of months of the year. Or you've miscalculated it kind of badly. First official image movie poster, I think, is definitely possible to come out. I don't think there's any real reason to predict a trailer, us actually seeing a trailer. It's just too early. Again, you have to remember, I think I have the document here, just to set expectations correctly. Yeah. It's a Paramount movie. They're going to market this movie in the same way as other movies. These are other franchise movies, and they never have trailers out that long before release. Look at Transformers 1, April to September from trailer 1 to release. Sonic 3 was August to December for the trailer. So we are probably thinking more SDCC for the trailer, not this event. We might hear a description of a scene that maybe gets shown at CinemaCon. But if they publicly put out anything, it will be this sort of stuff. The basics. Like, enough that, like, the Wikipedia page can actually have clarified information. Enough that the IMDb page can actually have clear information. That's what you need to sort of fill in. Just that when people type out the name of that movie, some sort of image comes up that's official. It's got a clear official title, and it's got a clear official date. Maybe the Zuko actor gets confirmed. If it is Steven Yeun, is Dante coming back? That's something you can do, because obviously they didn't publicly say who the Zuko actor is. So there's that as well. Is there a chance Zuko's not in the movie? That would be kind of crazy, but he is the Fire Lord, so, can he join Team Avatar for every mission? That would be a crazy decision. But it would make, it would create a big hype for potentially, movie 2, if, it is going to be more, Zuko-focused. That would be something. But it's why haven't they announced the Zuko situation? Have they just been going back and forth about who they want to do it? I'm not sure. But yeah, they need to do a lot of stuff like that. Really just clarify stuff. They need enough so that the official website can just have a section on the movie. Even if it basically doesn't have that much information, they need enough to just title, image, and maybe a brief description. Like the copyright description one that we have. We need something like that. That's the big sort of in terms of I've seen some people heavily criticize Avatar Studios for not doing any marketing for the movie, but I'm like, why do you expect them to do that much this early? Complaining about it months ago of that. When this is how they do their movie kind of marketing. That's why if they don't release any information publicly at CinemaCon, I think there is a sense that we're maybe a little bit behind. Because if they wait until SDCC to do everything here, that's a bit late in the game. It technically might be a little bit early for a first trailer, but if we're having to wait until here to get the title of the movie, that's crazy to me. So there's some stuff that just has to be confirmed sooner rather than later. And I do agree. I think that's the big point here. It's this is the reality of how they do their marketing. Is this the best way to do it? Is this the way fans want them to do it? No. We would prefer they show us little bits and pieces relatively often, just to keep the build going, just to keep the fandom interested, invested as we go through. Like, rather than what they tend to do here, which is just that, like, for most of these movies, it's like there's maybe 3 or 4 main dates where stuff actually happens, and then the rest of the time it's just nothing. Whereas I think with franchise stuff, you kind of want it to be a little bit more of a proper build. And then, like, in the weeks leading up, yeah, we probably will be just like, stop showing us new footage, just let us see the movie. Like, you know, you should have shown us the trailer like 2 months earlier, but now you're just showing us everything. Like, that's the sort of a problem that can often happen. But yeah, this is the problem, is these are the key dates to kind of get, and we kind of still don't have any of them. Whoops, this should be 30th. And then, yeah, New York Comic Con will also be kind of notable, will be much closer to release at that point. But Comic Con's going to be exciting because they do have some plans. Like, they do a vague teaser for Comic Con here. I think there's going to be way more than this. Like, there's still, I think, going to be a publishing panel. I'm assuming there has to be an Avatar Studios panel this year. There just kind of has to be. But yeah, these are the big dates. And then there probably will be information in the meantime that drops. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if certain other actor information does hit at times, like in between some of this stuff. But that's where we're at right now. Yeah, and then, like, I suppose, like, in terms of, predictions for some of this stuff, like, publishing here, because it's going to be interesting, actually, because it'll be the first Comic-Con that we go into where, like, the main novel isn't out yet, so they can actually, like, tease the Awakening of Roku a little bit. But the Jin novel will just have released, and we'll be kind of asking, so who's next? Who's the next Avatar Legends character going to be, and, like, what era is it in? They also have the Bending Academy books to tease at these as well. We would definitely expect Dark Horse to have a big showcase, I think, here. This is probably where Dark Horse really need to show their hand. Like, they need to, I think, announce next Avatar comic, next Korra comic, Beasts of the Four Nations. If we don't know about it already, they have to debut that here. And I'm fascinated to see what they say about Beasts of the Four Nations. I really want to know in exact detail what they say about Beasts of the Four Nations when they actually, like, do it. Yeah. And then this does get into, like, I'll go back here, actually, just to show this. So, obviously, Mako comic out now. When on earth are we predicting the next one? Because we have no concept of what the scheduling is like for this creative team. There were clearly huge problems, kind of start to finish, on this one. Now, some of that is for both creators, main creators, the writer and the artist. First time doing a book of this kind of size. So, was it just that the first time through was really rough, and the second time through will be better? But what is normal scheduling for this creative team? Because if it was Team Gurihuru, we'd be like, we're getting this book in 4 to 6 months, because they work like clockwork. If it's Peter Wortman, Faith Aaron Hicks, it's like probably like, yeah, it's 6 to maybe 9 months. But with this, it's like, surely there's no way it's 2.5 years again. 2 years, is it the full year? We just don't know what the scheduling is like, because we don't know the exact details of, like, when and where specific delays happened on this book and like what exactly the issues were at specific times, that sort of thing. Because realistically, if this book had maybe had a smoother production run, we'd probably already be on like Korra one shot number 3. That's how heavily delayed this book has been. And it's just the unfortunate thing on the Korra side of things is that like we've rarely had that consistency. I would say Runes of the Empire was very consistent, but a lot of the other Korra books have been messy, unfortunately. So the way they typically do the comics is that you'll note. I'll actually bring this up on here. What's a good one to do it with? I guess I'll just take a quick look at this. Marketing plans. Yeah, you'll note on the marketing stuff for these books, pretty much all of the books say something like this. That they typically want to announce the books about 9 months before release. Now, this doesn't always happen, but you'll note that this is typically what's happening with like a lot of the other books on this list. Like you could see here, a lot of these kind of more random books that are like the sticker book and the paint with water book. Yeah, 9 months before release because it's being announced in March with a December release. With the comics, because they typically want to have a reveal, they often hold back announcing them. And so sometimes we do get them announced at these conventions. For instance, Ashes of the Academy was only announced back in October. So it's releasing 5 months after the initial announcement because they really held back on that announcement. So this is one where it's just really clean, just announcement, it's out in 5 months, no real delay. Of course, the Mako comic is the reverse of that, where like that book was announced like years ago, and you know, stuff's all over the place. And it's like, yeah, the Jin book is another example of that. Though the one nuance with the Jin book is that technically the blank listing for that book had been up for like a year and a half. So I'd actually really like to know, like, has that book been like done for a while or what? Because it is unusual that we had that blank listing that turned into the Jin novel. So it's a little bit different where that kind of hasn't happened before. So that's kind of an interesting one. So if you put it that way, as in the absolute kind of like earliest that the book is going to come out is it'll be announced, say, like tomorrow for release in 5 months. That means the book still can come out in August this year. It can still come out, you know, in September, October, November, December. If they do the full 9 months, the earliest we can hope for is a December release. And they can do like any kind of time in between that. I think the better question is from a release cadence point of view, like when do we think is a nice point for the next books in these series to release? I think it would be a really good sign if they could get the next Korra comic out this year. I don't think it's going to happen though. I think unfortunately these comics probably do just have a higher like time to production. So this is probably next year. I do think that the next Avatar comic probably should be for this year. Just to keep the consistency up on that side of things. I think it would be a bit unfortunate if they kind of had the opportunity to maybe get multiple books out this year, but they're still only 2. It's an interesting one. Yeah, the ship dates, actually, that's an interesting point. Okay, so yeah, they added some of the promo shot stuff. Hmm. Yeah, Roku 2 was announced at New York Comic Con, though technically I found the listing before they announced it. It was one of those situations where the listings went up a few hours before the official reveal, which is usually always the case. They seem to get themselves into trouble a lot with the listings going up a bit early, which is it's fine. But I think you have to report on that stuff because it's like there's barely any coverage of the Comic-Con panels. Like the coverage has been terrible, especially official coverage. So it's kind of like if I see those listings, gotta post about them because it's clearer information than the game of telephone to get the information out of someone in the panel room most of the time. That's kind of the problem. Especially when most of the time the internet in the room is so bad you have to wait until after the panel anyway, so it's awkward situations. But yeah, stuff's happening. That's kind of I think the big thing. Am I going to do the Funko drop on Tuesday for the Avatar Funko Pops? No. Absolutely not. I think a lot of those pops are cool, but I think myself and a lot of Avatar fans do not want to engage whatsoever with that system. I think we're a few years past that stuff being like more widely kind of accepted, and I think it's more into the wow, that's a nuisance of a way to try and get Funko Pops. Because I remember, like in the comments section when Wave 1 came out on the video that I did, the amount of people jumping in the comment section being like, you don't know what you're talking about. These NFT pops are really good value, blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, you don't get the point I'm trying to make here. I get it. Like a lot of the people I think defending it were coming at it from their perspective of like, but you can get a really high value Funko Pop if you kind of roll the dice and kind of get good. And it's like, but like as Avatar fans, like the fans of my channel, I don't think most people are buying the Funko Pops because of how much they are worth. They're buying them because they want merchandise of specific characters. And most mainline releases are not super expensive. And so this just is the complete opposite of that. It's like, hey, here's a really cool Roku Funko Pop. Potentially waste money and get nothing. Maybe get super lucky, or buy in the secondary market for crazy money that you probably want to save up for Magic the Gathering Avatar later on in the year, where it's still a kind of, opening packs of cards at random, but at least all the cards are usable and all of them have art. There's like physical stuff in them. Whereas if you don't get a physical pop from one of those packs, you effectively have like what, 5 cent worth of like NFTs, which are just pictures of digital Funko Pops. Will we get new Funko Pops outside of ATLA in the future? I'm assuming we'll get stuff for the movie, which is technically kind of moving away from ATLA. I'm assuming we'll get Funko Pops for Seven Havens. But I don't know. We have to see about that. But yeah, I think just for people like budgeting stuff, it's just like, I think that's not the thing that should be on your radar. Like, you need to be thinking about the actual Avatar toy line that has multiple lines of collector stuff, action figures, cosplay stuff, plushes. It's coming out in the summer. That's only a few months away. Avatar Magic the Gathering in November. All these books potentially, and I know not everyone's going to buy all of the books, but like there's extra novels this year. There's got to be more comics, I guess, at some point down the line. You're probably going to want one or two of the other books that are coming out. Don't forget that the Kickstarter for the Roku RPG thing is going to hit any day now, and you might want to get the deluxe version of that with all the fancy stuff, and that might be a little bit expensive as well. Because, like, imagine you miss badly buying all those NFT card packs, and then the next day the Kickstarter launches, and it's like, oh no, I can't get all my fancy bending scroll stuff for the Voyage of the Unity. Like, you don't want to be in that position. Now that, like, Avatar is building to a point where, like, there's got to be a lot of stuff. Like, I think most of us are just going to have to accept we're not going to be able to get everything. So yeah, that's why the Funko NFT thing is not even on my radar, like, at all. Like, just to show it off, because it's finally kind of up here on the site. You can see here, the Roku with Dragon. Super nice pop, but it's the Grail one. There's 999 available. Low chance of getting it. This is probably these two are probably like the weakest of the batch, because it's very kind of like low key. These are probably the ones you don't want. Korra pops, like this is the real kind of, gut punch here of like, really, Korra pops after all this time, and they're only doing Korra pops in this line and not the main line. That's rough. Like, why is this Sokka not part of one of the main lines, considering some of the other stuff that we get? Like, is this like the first ever piece of like Rava or Vatu merch, like, specifically, and it's wildly exclusive? I just don't understand. Like, if we got really good waves of standard pops, I don't think I'd mind this as much. But this is a real slap in the face to collectors. That, like, the last wave I thought was pretty terrible from a character variety point of view compared to what this is. And it's like priorities, and if you are a Funko collector, it's like, what are you meant to feel that they've done this? I just don't like that. Rava and Vatu kites. They're going to do a Rava and Vatu cosplay set in the Jazzwares line, like the Aang and Zuko one. Dress up as kites. Yeah. Just, yeah, a severe lack of Korra merch. I hope the Jazzwares line includes Korra eventually. Because I think there's going to be a lot of hype when they finally reveal, like, a Korra action figure for the first time. Because we've never had one. We've had a few statues, none of which have been, like, super available or, like, the best pricing. So stuff like that, I think, will get fans very, very excited. Whenever they finally do it. But yeah, we need to see that kind of progress, and if they're willing to do it. Why do you not like the physical Funko Pops? I do like the physical Funko Pops. I just don't like the way you get those specific ones. Like, I have like loads of the actual Funko Pops that you can get in the mainline stuff. It's just, I hate what them just doing that NFT thing does to the pricing of that wave of pops. That you can buy an entire wave of one of the standard waves of Funko Pops for like, I don't know, 100, 150. Just one of these pops on its own on the secondary market is going to be like, nearly that full price, double it, triple it, or something like that. Like, it's going to be crazy, like what the pricing actually is on those if you want them, unless you get super, super lucky. And again, my other point is that like the last wave of Avatar pops, the deluxe ones, I just thought was very meh. I think the idea of having like the element symbols behind the characters was cool, but I just thought the actual underlying pops for like most of them was just weird. Like, you're back to like book 1 and Katara. It was all just a little bit plain, and then the Zuko had a really like unusual, like, his outfit was like, which one is that? Like, I'm not sure. Like, those are ones I'm kind of waiting to see if they go on sale. I might pick up like the Aang or something like that if it ever goes on sale. But I just don't want those for full price because I already have. How many Aangs do I have? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I already have 5 different Aangs. And I'm happy with how different those Aangs are to each other. I don't need like one from like the last mainline wave, like the Aang just holding onto the air ball. To me, that's not really different enough. Whereas like, what are they not putting in the new waves? Why is Sokka in his armor not one of the mainline pops? No, instead that's an exclusive one behind this NFT system. That's the problem. So yeah, that's the unfortunate problem with some of that stuff. Like, you can see here, like the Funko have like Avatar stuff, but like in the last wave, like, this is cool and all, but I'm also like, I don't like it maybe when they're getting too niche with the references before they've done certain characters. Like, why are we getting Appa with armor as a supersized pop before Roku in the main line? Like, we already have an Appa, that's great. Do we need to do the Samurai, Ronin, Appa, Momo before like mainline Kurok, mainline Roku, some of these other ones? Like this Zuko, like, what's this outfit like meant to be? Like, what's this scene is this meant to like represent necessarily? It's just a little bit like odd to me, and especially because they've tried to do something kind of unique with him, but then it's just like it's book 1 Katara, it's standard Toph, standard Aang. It's very plain. And then you go to the NFT wave and it's like, a Korra, Unavatu's in the wave. Roku with one of the nicest looking pops we've probably ever seen. That's why I don't understand. And this is going to be the key thing with like all the merchandise lines coming up. In like the new stuff from Jazzwares looks pretty good, but I'm already at the point where I'm like, we've been down this road before. When are we getting like Mei and Ty Lee in that line? When are we getting our first Mei and Ty Lee action figure? Like, are we gonna have to wait until like wave like 7 or 8 years after the fact, or are we going to get there a little bit sooner? Because if we start doing the thing that we've done in other lines before, and it's like, here's 5 Zukos, here's 5 Aangs, before we ever approach even getting through like the main 10 characters. That's where we've had problems with, I think, like all of the other lines, basically. The Funkos are the only lines that have got far enough in to do stuff like Mei and Ty Lee. And I would even say even Funko has the issue of like not doing certain pops at the right time, especially on the Korra side of things. Yeah, like it's crazy we have an Amon pop, but we don't have a standard Bolin. We only have Nook Tuk Bolin from the first NFT wave. So that will be interesting. Though us having an action figure line that will include the movie will be interesting, because will we get action figure leaks that maybe spoil elements of the movie? I'm assuming the marketing won't be so far behind that the figures are going to be showing us stuff for like the first time ever. But at the same time, I'm almost like, I can almost picture it in my mind. You know, like Jazzware's toy line leaks. First look at Aang movie villain. Like, we've never seen what this character is called, what they look like, and here's the action figure of that character, Dave Bautista's character. I can almost see something like that happening. I think they'll avoid it, but it's like, I think it's probably going to happen. Will we ever get Korra and Avatar in 4K remaster? I think a few people have asked this before. My understanding is that that would basically not do anything to the underlying quality. Because already, like with Avatar, you're trying, it's already kind of like up resolutioned into Blu-ray quality. You're just going to be trying to, you know, create stuff that's not there going into 4K. Like, they've kind of done the best effectively they can do with it. And then Korra was already at that quality, and then it's like, do you need it in 4K? Where, you know, that sort of idea. That's tricky. Yeah, 2 weeks until the new movie, yeah, we have had a bit of a discussion about until the movie news, potentially. Again, I think it's important to clarify that, like, it's not absolutely locked in that we're going to get news here, but it would be weird if the Aang movie was not at CinemaCon. But we don't know what news we're actually going to get coming out of this. Like, I'm going to guess they will probably show either an initial trailer or like a scene to people at CinemaCon. We will get reports coming out of CinemaCon, as in like via text, about what this scene looks like, so a description of it. Paramount, I think, will then use this to probably deliver publicly to us information like this. As in, like, this is probably the best we can hope for in 2 weeks, is stuff like finalized title, a clear commitment to the January date, or maybe a new date for the movie, and maybe first official image or movie poster, logo probably in there as well. That's the stuff that's probably possible here, because remember, we're still 9 months out. Paramount doesn't like to do major bits of marketing until much closer to release. We're not going to see a trailer here, even though the people at CinemaCon behind closed doors might get to see a trailer. We won't get to see a trailer. We're probably more looking at Comic-Con for that sort of thing. When do we think the YouTube channel will start changing? Yeah, I'm not sure, because you look at this, it's going to start changing because they're going to have to add this stuff. Like, the Legends channel is going to have this podcast stuff and then other stuff in the future. The other channel is eventually going to have Chibi Minis and this gameplay series thing. And again, this is all for the anniversary, so this is all meant to be this year. So we're going to have to find out about this stuff sooner rather than later. I'm guessing it will be more towards the end of the year, and to tie in with like the new stuff. But this will be a sign of kind of things to come. Because I do think the official channels are in a weird spot where it's like, what content should they be doing? Because clearly, I think people are done with the clips, just relentless clips over and over again, every single possibility of clips. People don't seem to like it when they do more opinion-based stuff that like fan channels typically do, because it feels weird that they're doing like official views on that, and you have all the accounts to start going like, canonically the Avatar fan channel views this as being the best thing over here, and it's like, that's not how the official YouTube works. It's not that official in that way. So they're in a weird spot ultimately, where in my mind the stuff they should be doing is like, say, what our focus was today. Where was the interview on the official Avatar channel with Kiku Hughes, with Alex Monick? Where was the hype up of like showing preview pages from this book, directing people where to get this book because it's out now? That's what the official channels to me should really be doing. Not just a random short that most people probably don't even look at saying the book is out, but like a proper video right there talking about it. That sort of stuff. Just on the marketing side of things, like when the new novels come out, put up an audiobook preview. The audiobook preview is probably one of the least found things online, typically, in my mind. Like, you rarely see other people posting about it, and I feel like I'm the only one who ever like talks about those audiobook previews when they come out. But in my mind, like the first 3-4 chapters of each novel probably should just be posted on the YouTube, just to give a preview of the novel in a way, and just to highlight that, hey, we know some people struggle to put the time aside to read a book. They're available with audiobooks, and they're really underdone. More official news stuff just via their videos, just to make that stuff really, really clear. Because like, I think it's one of those things where, like, I'm almost asking them to make my channel less notable, but I'm like, my channel shouldn't be the place that, like, sort of covers all of the news and compiles it into videos in, like, the most kind of complete way. Like, I think to a certain degree the official channels should be the ones like making it super clear. What is the new news? When's it happening? When's the stuff coming out? That sort of stuff. But they don't do that. It's barely news focused. So I do hope that the Avatar Legends channel with Avatar with the podcast does become more news focused. Like, I think it was a pretty positive sign that, like, with the anniversary announcement, they immediately had Janet Varney, Dante Bosco focusing on stuff. What are my thoughts on canon information given by the YouTube channel when they do deep dives and stuff like that? I suppose my question is, when you say canon information, is like, my understanding would be that, has one of those YouTube videos ever presented new information nowhere else? Like, I understand to a certain degree, say, like, the podcast that sometimes via interviews occasionally touches on something that's kind of new. But in their kind of recap style videos where they maybe do a deep dive into a topic, I don't believe they really have official canon information. Maybe there's an example that I haven't seen or anything like that, but it's one of those interesting ones. Because I know for a fact there's been at least 2 or 3 times over the past few years where I've pointed out stuff like, hey, like, it seems like the channel has posted something new, but it's just been, oh, look, they got a detail wrong. I remember specifically there was one thing about, like, they posted some question about like what age was Toph when this thing happened, and it had all these ages listed, and no one knew what the right answer was. Some people very confident that they did know the right answer, but I looked into it and it was like, this has never been stated anywhere. And it was actually that they took that answer from Avatar Wiki. Avatar Wiki didn't have a source for that age or date. Avatar Wiki had to correct that, and then it made the YouTube channel's thing wrong. So there's a lot of stuff like that as well, where, you know, a lot of the quote-unquote official stuff still relies on fan stuff to kind of like compile information. In that, like, imagine what the YouTube channel would be like if Avatar Wiki went away. Because as far as we're aware, they don't actually have like an internal, like, official wiki style thing at Avatar Studios. Like, because we know from like a lot of kind of novel writers, comic writers and stuff like that, interviews, they are pretty much just relied upon to kind of do the research themselves, like read the content, go to the wiki to find out information. They're not really like given stuff to kind of work with necessarily. Yeah. I hope things are going to be better for the YouTubes going forward. I think that's the big thing, that we're past the days of this just being like this really kind of low effort kind of team, not able of really doing anything, that whole sort of stuff, and that the signs that, like, say we're getting some new animated stuff is exciting, and then who knows what we'll actually get when Avatar Studios finally starts. This is just the start of these different series. When's the other stuff going to happen? Yeah, the official timeline is still a little bit of an issue. They corrected some of it, but they didn't correct it fully. It's tricky. I do think some people are being like overly nitpicky about some of the things on the timeline being wrong, on the basis of, like, you know, it should be plus or minus one, when clearly they're doing a little bit of rounding kind of up and down. So like stuff like, oh, this should technically be this, but like we're getting into the situation then of like, do you really want them to use like decimal point numbers for years, and, you know, really get into the nitty gritty of like, this happened on this day, exact months and stuff like that. As a basic but somewhat in-depth timeline, I appreciate what's there. It's not great that there are some very obvious errors, but I do think some people are also like over criticizing like the fundamental aspect of it, when there's some stuff that like we don't really know. And it is complicated, because like a lot of people I think do sometimes get themselves very confused about it, because some people go off on like, oh, it should be this, and I'm like, but you have to remember it's going off like harmonic convergence and stuff like that. So we're talking about like the time of the year the harmonic convergence happened, not like other stuff, and it's just a kind of like weird point in that regard. So like I don't have any problem with them saying book 1, book 2 and book 3 all take place in technically the year 10,000, because basically the idea is that like book 1 is 9999.5, and they're not doing 0.5, so it rounds up to 10,000. And I think there's a little bit of a trust that like you know that it's like, okay, there's a 6-month time gap there, and then there's only a couple of weeks time gap there, that's why it's the way it is. Because if you actually put it down as 999 and then 10,000, you can be sure someone else over here will be like, well, technically a whole year doesn't happen in between like book 1 and book 2. And it's just like, whichever way you want to be weirdly pedantic about it. that's why I'm like, you have to choose your battles with these things about like which way you want to be really picky about it. In that, like, there's the very obvious point of they just got the dates between book 2 and 3 wrong, and they corrected it because it's the really obvious error that was just off and in no way correct. Versus, you know, like, are we really going to freak out about them because they said this all happens in the same year? Which, like, technically it does. It's the year leading up to harmonic convergence and stuff like that. It's just that idea. And it's just also just the idea of, like, being super knowledgeable about the timeline and stuff like that doesn't mean you need to kind of be a pedant about it. I don't like it when these errors happen either, but I also don't freak out about it at the same time. All those villains in one year. Yep. Yeah. Book 1, Book 2, Book 3, all back to back to back. And Hundun. If the game is still canon, which we don't know what the situation is, but there's that. Yeah, my thoughts on the game is that I think the reason the game is not mentioned on the official timeline or in the RPG is just that because of the weird licensing issue with the game where you can't buy it officially. And I think what's the deal, like, it was Activision's license for Avatar basically ran out and they just didn't renew it, so that's why it had to be taken down. So I'm guessing that puts it in a kind of weird situation where it's like, it's an IP game from Activision, so like they can't sell it, but then there's this weird situation where, like, can Nickelodeon use it even though it's their game, but like Activision published it? So I think there's probably just a weird thing about, like, can they even mention it officially, like, in any capacity? Can they actually acknowledge that game in any sort of, like, official text? Like, the RPG can't mention Hundun because it's officially acknowledging the game that kind of doesn't exist anymore. Where, like, it's still probably canon in the background because, like, nothing really contradicts it. It's just, until they sort something out there, I guess they just can't mention it. For almost like legal licensing issues, basically. Am I planning to stream the Korra game at some point? It's something that's on the table. I just kind of trying to find the right point as well, and then the setup as well, because, like, I have it on my Xbox One, and it's a bit of an awkward setup to do the streaming for that and stuff like that. Because doing the Fortnite streams was a bit of a mess. Doing the Avatar Quest for Balance stuff was a little bit awkward as well. So just requires a bit more setup on the streaming end of things. But we'll see if there is a bit of a gap between stuff, maybe. But also we're going into a few months where I think a lot of news is about to happen. And then we have 3 books to talk about. Plus, like, there's another comic coming up, CinemaCon, SDCC. I think everything's going to start to hit, like, really, really quickly in a couple of weeks. So I don't know if it's maybe going to be anytime soon, but, like, I'd like to cover it at some point. But probably a lot of setup stuff I need to do on that. So otherwise, I guess any final topics that people want to talk about before I wrap up the stream? Otherwise, like, next stream, of course, is probably going to be, I guess it will be the Ashes of the Academy equivalent stream to this one. So, like, this time, obviously, we went really in depth on this on the stream. Next time, which I guess will be early April, we'll do, I guess, Ashes of the Academy discussion. And I guess it would also be anything from CinemaCon we can also talk about on Livestream. Obviously, I'll cover that in videos if anything does happen, of course. But we'll do the live stream as well. Oh yeah, Realms Collide. Yeah, let's get something up about this. I don't know. Did anyone watch the stream they did? The big Michaela Murphy stream that they did? Because I did, and I was amazed at how underwhelming it all was. That it was just like, I hope this is more than just like she announces the release date for the game and otherwise it's just a random voice actor Q&A, and that's basically what it was. And then I thought the announcement was so low key when they actually got to it that I was actually like stunned that like that's it. Like they just say the 18th is the US release date for the game. We know you've been waiting a while for it, and that was basically it. And I'm like, wow, way to slap everyone in the face who's been waiting for it from like other regions. It's like just the US release date for the game. And then, especially because we basically know the 18th is not just the US release date for the game. It basically is global launch on Tuesday. It's just global launch, like minus a select few regions it's going to take a couple weeks longer to launch in. And it's just like, why didn't you say that? And I do think that this is where communication about the game has been really not great. Communication has been, I think, awkward in that way for a long time, where I would say for the first like 10 months of knowing about this game, everyone was set that like there's just going to be a day the game is out everywhere. Then a few weeks ago they changed it to it'll gradually launch over the course of a few days, and it's all just very hands off. The way they did the announcement of the characters I thought was again so low key. It's just like literally showing up pictures of characters, and it's like, is that even like a model from the game? It just looks like you took something out of one of the art books. It might be new art to a certain degree, but it's like, that's it. And then at least to me, it still had the situation where it's like, okay, it's ATLA everything. Like, sure, technically it's Roku and Yang Chen, but it's as past avatars to Aang rather than from their own eras. And like, we've known for like 9 months that there's novel characters coming to the game. Who are they? When are they coming? Are they doing anything to make the novel characters a bit more special and like have story content to go with them? Because I feel if they just throw Rongi into the game, it's like cool for people who know who she is, but like if you don't know who she is, like you don't have the content like Avatar Generations had to get you up to speed on who she is. So I am a bit worried about this game. Because I just think that I don't think there's that much story content in it, even though they technically have a story scenario. I get they've probably been holding a lot of it back until global launch. But that's been kind of frustrating. But there's just a sense that from the footage that I saw like very early on, compared to like more recent stuff from people playing the game, I've not really got a sense for like how much the game has evolved over the last like 9-ish months, like at all. And to a certain degree it comes across as like, has it literally just been 9 months of like fixing what looks like the same bug like over and over again. That's what the Discord has come across as. Like I think a lot of the times, it's just been roughly the same issues, just like continuing to be adjusted. So I hope they just have a big, huge strategy for release, because it's not been great. And then a little bit of a behind the scenes thing here, but like even public press release kind of stuff has been all over the place. Like I was contacted like last week, like, hey, do you want to access the game early? Just agree to this embargo. And I'm like, yes, I would like the game early, but why is there an embargo? Like the game's out in like so many territories. And they explained to me that like, okay, it's because the embargo is for like the kind of quote unquote launch version of the game. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Still don't have early access. I'm in the kind of tester thing, but like no ability to actually like download the game. So if I get early access, I guess maybe tomorrow. But otherwise, I think I'm going to be starting on launch day like everyone, which is a little bit awkward. Because again, like, I'm in the creator program for the game. What does that mean? I don't know. It all feels so hands off. And then like they announced the release date for the game, but they haven't even publicized it that much. Like they just ended the stream and that was that. No summary, no like big announcement. Look what was just revealed on our stream, the launch date for the game. They're not even hyping it that much, which is so weird. I don't know. Let's see. Will we get the movie on Blu-ray? Yeah, I think that's the one the one thing we can probably directly confirm with Avatar Studios stuff is that the movies that come out in cinemas, they're absolutely getting Blu-rays. The question is probably like, say, Seven Havens. Is Seven Havens going to get a Blu-ray release? Like, and how quick will it be? Because it's going to be like a streaming thing. I'm assuming because Avatar has the history of doing it, we probably will. But again, how long is that going to take? I'm not sure. But yeah, the movie will be fine, no problems. Yeah. Like, there's no way they're not going to have the movie and then have the like the digital kind of purchase release and stuff like that. Did the Knuckles show get a physical release? I actually don't know. Yeah, it did actually. Yeah, I'm looking on Amazon right now. Knuckles Blu-ray. Yeah, region ABC Blu-ray, €21. And it seems like there is European versions. There's a Steelbook version. So yeah, they did it. When did this come out actually? 9th of September, and Knuckles TV series released April. So 5 months later. So they actually got it out pretty quick. Okay, that's a good sign, because I think we're going to be doing things in probably the same way as like Sonic, as Transformers. So yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. And then, like, especially if they do, in fact, like, air Seven Havens on Nickelodeon as well, which I'm guessing they probably will. Yeah, it'll probably get a Blu-ray release. I think they know there's an audience for that sort of, like, collector type stuff, that, like, this is not one of their shows that they feel would fail if it got, like, a release like that. People want that. It allows them a chance to do, like, extra content, which they like to do. Yeah, I think they know that they need to do that. Especially because they know going in that they're like 2 seasons. That sort of thing. Yeah, Star Wars is a bit all over the place. To the point where, like, I don't have a lot of it on Blu-ray. I have, like, what do I actually have? I have DVDs for, like, the first 6 movies, and I think I have, like, one Blu-ray for, like, a sequel trilogy stuff. I have some DVDs for Clone Wars, some Rebels Blu-rays, but lost track of some of that stuff. Do you think Seven Havens will get more than 26 episodes? Maybe. Like, my guess is, if it happens, it'll be a thing where, like, the show subtitle maybe changes for, like, secondary seasons, and it's like, it's proper, like, big time skip, something like that, and here's another, 26 episodes or something like that. There's maybe a chance for that, like, they'll have to change, like, the cast because, like, everyone's going to be aging up and stuff like that. Maybe. But at the same time, this is where, like, we don't know what the full strategy is for Avatar Studios when it comes to this stuff. Like, is the plan actually now to be like, no, we're going to have much more regular main shows. So this is Avatar Pavi's series. It's these 26 episodes. And we're moving on to the next main series thing, which is actually we're going backwards to a past Avatar. Maybe. Something like that. Again, from the leaked kind of slate of images stuff, like maybe an Air Avatar show or something like that might be next. We have to wait and see. In Seven's Haven's story, do you think they'll do backstory for how the girls meet their animal companions? I usually would say yes, but then I remember that, like, we had to get the Naga origin story in a comic. They did show us the Appa origin. We got the Pabu origin story again in a kind of webcomic thing, Republic City Hustle. So they're kind of like half and half about, like, if they do the animal companion debut in the actual content. My guess is that because there is the unique dynamic of, like, you got the twins, but then you also have, it seems like the animals are almost linked as well. I think they probably will establish where they got or found the animal companions. So, yeah, I think they will do that because clearly the girl's past is a bit of a mystery. So there's something to delve into there. Do you think there might be an animated series for Kyoshi? In terms of adaptation, no, because they've already said, and admittedly it's from a few years ago, but in an interview, they're not planning to do adaptations of content. Now, they said that in relation to the comics, but I assume the same is true for the novels, that they don't really want to do, as their big animated projects, adaptation stuff. Is there a chance we could see some animated Kyoshi stuff somewhere down the road? Yeah, I think so, because, like, I could see them doing, like, an anthology style thing where, like, here's an episode about this avatar, about this avatar, about this avatar, and realizing that, like, at least an episode somewhere that features, like, here's Kyoshi and Rangi involved in some sort of a mission is a cool thing that they could do. Will they do a full-on series? I don't know. Because I think they could do it. Like, if they really, really wanted to, they could do, like, a mini-series about Kyoshi that's, like, set after Shadow of Kyoshi. That might be the way to do it. Where you you do it in a way where like you're effectively reintroducing a lot of these characters, but novel readers just have a slight heads up on who these characters are, that sort of thing. Better planned out. Yeah, I think that's sort of a lock with everything Avatar Studios, is that it's all better planned out. They have much more confidence from like the network, from Paramount, to do what they need to do. Especially I think with the series, compared to maybe the movies, maybe feel like Paramount is a little bit more involved from like a marketing perspective, hitting the beats that they want, maybe. But the series I think are very creative, like they're full on Mike and Brian focus. Is there a possibility Korra is the next novel duology? I feel it has to be Karuk. I think Karuk fits too nicely into everything they've done in terms of, yes, it likely has to be a water avatar. But two, he would fill in the role of like the novels cover the 4 avatars before Aang. Also, it seems like there is a bit of a tendency to the writers like dealing with the avatars who actually have some like, you know, the more substance behind them, but they're not one of like the main character avatars. So I'd be kind of surprised if Korra was on the table for novels right now. It probably has to be Karuk, because I think it sort of sells itself that it's going to be teenage Karuk with his, you know, teenage team avatar, and it's Jeonju, Kelsang, you know, these characters, Heiran, that you really, really liked from the Kyoshi novels, from the backstory from the Kyoshi novels, but we're getting a full-on book with them. That stuff getting fleshed out more. A story with Karuk before it kind of all goes wrong. That's kind of what we want, I think, covered in a bit more detail. Especially if it is maybe a bit Water Tribe focused, which we maybe haven't seen as much of. That's the big thing. Caught up in the novels, only finished the first Kyoshi book. Need to find the time. Yep. Reading takes time. Obviously, audiobooks are there, where it's a way to get through them while doing some other stuff, you know. Yeah, the Cataclysm heading into the Pavi series. Yeah, I'd be super surprised if we don't really move things on quite a bit. Like I'm guessing that happens like at least 30 years later, if not more. But we'll see. We'll see. Old Granny Korra saving the world. Yeah, that is the interesting point. Is like, yeah, like, what way are they going to do this? Wonder when the Kickstarter happens for Voyage of the Unity. We'll have to wait and see. Where is it gone? It's coming soon. I don't know what exactly that means. They obviously gave us a little bit of a teaser in the last newsletter about it. I'm guessing this is a reveal that like bending scrolls of some sort is one of the kind of deluxe kind of items you get to a certain degree. Other than that, you can see they say, we're being coy about the starting date because we've learned over these years it's vitally important to have everything lined up before launching a major endeavor. And then you just relay a lot of the other stuff from before that. Yeah, it's very similar to the Journey of Aang stuff. I actually checked, are these some of the cards, but I don't think they're the exact same things. They're all different, so that's interesting. I'm fascinated to see how they do this, though, because my initial thoughts kind of heading into this are that I think there is a little bit of a sell to be done on this. I don't think that this is maybe the absolute guarantee insta success, because it's the Roku era. It's not one of the really well known eras. Like on front of the book, you're not necessarily going to have an Iroh on the front, Aang, Korra. People like Roku, of course, but it's a very specific part of the Roku era about this ship that is an exclusive kind of story, basically, as part of the RPG. I'm very interested to see what way they market this in terms of really getting across why is this really notable content. I'm glad we know that there is the if we open this up, I'm glad we know there's this. It comes with a guide to the Unity, so there is a full lore section, I guess, about the ship. That's really good to know. The adventures are always a little bit hit and miss about just how interesting they are. I think it should be good with the focus. But if there's no new legend character, that's an interesting one, because they mention Takukak is here, but we already have him. So might they just reprint his data sheet? I'd like to see some other characters get the focus here. Maybe we get Teak. That'd be kind of nice, official art for Teak. But I hope they have something like that. Because I think that's the sort of stuff that they do kind of really need in this. Yeah, Ryoshan, if they could do that, that would be really nice to see. But they really need to stress, though, I think, as they go through this, how much new art there is going to be across this whole thing, how different or not it is than one of the standard releases, because it effectively looks like a standard release just without maybe some legend NPC characters. And then the big thing for the premium edition is going to be pricing. I think actually for both editions, probably pricing is going to be the big thing. This, I think this has to be basically priced around the same as a standard pre-order for a book. This, they just have to avoid going crazy with it, I think. They already confirm, bending scrolls, in-world handouts, maps, other elements. The maps, I hope, are really good, because obviously the maps in the books have been a little bit of a disappointment. So I hope they're actually solid maps that are kind of nicely detailed. In-world handouts, there's a lot of what does that really mean? Because I can certainly see a scenario where I think a lot of us Avatar fans come out of this feeling I'd like 2 of those premium items, but I actually don't think the rest is that good. And there's a big money kind of situation of just, do I want to pay, I don't know what, 200, 250 for this premium set when all I really want is the bending scroll and the map, but the other stuff is kind of a bit This is where I'm interested to see what they do for stretch goals for this. I'm guessing immediately one of the stretch goals is going to be turning the booklets into a full-on hardcover, because it is effectively just an adventure guide. It's the Unity adventure guide, basically. So I'm guessing over a certain point they'll just turn this into a hardcover thing instead of it being 5 separate booklets. I'd be shocked if that wasn't the way it ends up going. But yeah, marketing for this hasn't been great. That's the other thing, is that, like, I think Magpie, the fact that they've been so silent over the last, like, couple of months has not been super helpful. The fact that most people, I think, don't really know what the situation is between, like, it's a Magpie thing, but it's through Beetle and Grimm, but you're going back to Kickstarter for this, and then, like, is this the book for the year? Are Magpie actually releasing a book this year? That's confusing, because the Spirit World book is, like, it's still being worked on, I guess, but, like, is it happening anytime soon? I'd like to know. Because, again, it's like a budgeting type thing of just, like, you've got this thing, but then the much more interesting book, the Spirit World book, is, like, we're waiting for that. Yeah, the launch. Yeah, it was like the initial launch announcement that we are getting a Legends RPG mentioned the Spirit World thing. It's like right there, like the first ever announcement about it, really. I wonder is because it's got Spirit World information. I'm wondering, is that being, like, held back by Avatar Studios for some reason? Because the Beast of the Four Nations also has, like, spirits in it as well. Like, are they holding back on that information for anything? I'm not really sure. We'll just have to wait and see. Because we're past the time when Magpie would usually announce their main release, so it does feel like this is sort of being roughly timed to be when the books would usually get announced. So, if they do the Spirit World book, it's we're off the usual schedule of, like, pre-order January, February, March for release in, like, November. That's what this seems to be. I don't know. Either way, I'm guessing it's not going to be, like, super soon. I think we'd know if it was, like, a week away already. Probably already know if it was 2 weeks away. So, I have to assume it's April. Sometime in April, maybe. That, I don't know. Will they, after the movie gets announced, they'll use the hype of that to promote this or something like that? Kind of feels like they need that little bit of a boost, but we'll see. I always like seeing what they do here, but, like, I do think the campaign needs to be good to justify why you need to get this. And I hope they do it well, and that they appeal to people from a lore perspective as well as just, like, the gameplay kind of aspect of it. Because, yeah, I hope they don't overprice it, is I think the main thing. And then our other crowdfunding thing, Journey of Aang board game. Apparently they'll have an update with details shortly. Project Manager will open Friday or Monday. Still waiting for news on painted versions. It's been a while since the last update on this. But yeah, the kind of backer kit thing behind the scenes is kind of what we're waiting for at this point. it's been a little bit frustrating, I think, just because like they did some initial updates like a while ago, but then never really like followed up on them all that much. Like, what was the last thing they did here? Yeah, like the announcing the characters, like the poll for this, and it's like they didn't even ask us what characters to put in the poll, and then just put the poll up. I think I posted a comment down here. I'm just like, yeah, the really obvious one, like, no May or Ty Lee. Never got a response or anything like that. They're like, really? You want to put Professor Zay and the Mechanist in before May and Ty Lee in like the non-bender expansion? Bit weird. And I don't buy the excuse that like, oh, but like they're technically enemies for most of the series, and it's like, if Zuko has a hero card, and he's only like on Team Avatar for like under 10 episodes at the end of the series, May certainly can be one because she kind of makes her turn only a few episodes later. Same with Ty Lee. We can do it that way. Why did Nickelodeon all of a sudden love the franchise when the Korra situation happened and the Nicktoon airings? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Why did they love the franchise? I don't know. Is the question asking basically like, why did they commit to a sequel show for Avatar and then treat it so poorly? Like the ultimate answer to that is probably just that at the time, ultimately, Korra was a extremely odd show on Nickelodeon. It didn't match any of their other shows. Is one of their only shows where like it's like you can't air the episodes out of order because you could have to watch it in order. So that like creates a weird situation when it comes to like re-airing it, where you have to do it in exactly ordered batches, specific times and stuff like that. You can't just treat it like SpongeBob and you can pretty much air it in any order you want. It didn't match anything they were about. Now, obviously, it's a leadership problem, of course, as well, because they didn't realize that a show like Korra gets eyes on Nickelodeon that aren't usually on Nickelodeon. But it's that weird thing of like, they kind of decided, well, those eyes we don't really care about. Because, you know, it's sort of aimed at a slightly older audience. That's not what they're aiming for, even though it's still an audience. And stuff like that. That's the fundamental kind of answer to it, is that back in 2012, that was their thought process. Now, under Paramount, their thought process is actually that, like, wait, we want that audience. Because we think we can build on that audience by doing more of this. Because Avatar and Korra were both popular. If we do more, that will be popular, and other stuff will be popular as well. They finally, it feels like, seen the light from that point of view on things. And so, you know, we're getting a movie. They're confident enough in Avatar to give it a movie, give it a third sequel show, and more. We'll see how it goes, obviously. Like, it's still early days yet, but it straight away does feel like it is a very different situation now. That to a certain way, if it feels crazy to a certain degree that like Korra ever even happened, given the way what Nickelodeon wanted at the time. It's like the right people were in the right positions just long enough to get the show made to a certain degree, and then it's like, well, I guess we have to commit to it to a certain degree, but we're not going to support it fully. And you can see that across the board. Like, why did they stop doing Korra soundtracks after the first one? Well, they had some weird thing in their heads that it should have sold like so many more than it actually did, even though I'm pretty sure the original Korra soundtrack did well for the type of soundtrack that it was at the time. But they just stopped. They just kind of, to a certain degree, gave up on it. And then it's like, yeah, there's never any merch backing it up and all this sort of stuff. And again, that's another reason why things are going well here. They're going to actually have a merch line out with a show they expect to be popular. So, it's looking better. It's looking a lot better now that everything seems to be much more in order, planned out, and like it's all actually going to culminate in January, February next year and happen. Yep. Yeah, that kind of highlights the situation, yeah, that some of the initial Korra merchandise was very bland. It was home items, basically, with basic, logos and stuff like that on it, symbols, shot glasses. That like, oh, this audience doesn't want action figures, when it's actually like, no, that audience still wants action figures. You just don't seem to get it. That sort of idea. But I think they know better what they're dealing with now. And a lot of that is just that I guess the leadership is a bit better at the moment, and that they see the positives of Avatar. So yeah, probably going to wrap things up there for the stream. Like I said, next stream will be... Let me check the dates. What it's very likely to be. So the comic's out there, so not that week, not this week. It'll probably be April 6th. That way it'll be basically 2 weeks after the release of Ashes of the Academy, and it will be the weekend following CinemaCon, so we can discuss all of that stuff. Assuming there is stuff to talk about, which I think there will be, so it should be pretty exciting. Obviously, in the meantime, I'll cover any news that actually comes out on the channel in news updates when it happens. Like, I'll have some sort of coverage on Realms Collide for the release date and stuff like that. I'll try to get like initial thoughts, finally getting a chance to play the game in the week, assuming it is out in my region. I think it is. But we'll get there. There's stuff happening. That's the big thing. So, yeah, thanks everyone for coming out to the stream. Thanks for watching, and bye.